you serious?
All right, so
Wow, man, we make Tim feel bad. Tim, you
I
not to do
mean-
that. You might love it. Seriously, you know what I mean? Tim's got something to do with
I
it. Like,
think this
Tim's like,
would
I'm
be
gonna big
actually
baby.
it.
You always case, peeps.
Are there any
Okay,
other versions
so,
of this board
any-
game or
What?
something?
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know what that person's asking.
You gave
Yeah,
up.
well, at least $14,000.
You gave up on that?
Let's see.
You
It
want
says
to- you want to
studio. I think that might be your link.
Did you get one out?
Yes.
Yeah, but I think it expired.
Was it still
Read
white?
all the downs and ins and outs.
And it wasn't really
What
when
if
I
it
had
bounces
it,
me
though.
to the...
Like,
No,
I
it
think that's why it
doesn't.
says to eat it with a
That's
spoon.
mine.
Like there's instruction on there to eat with a spoon.
Here, I'll actually go to the
Try to
box
get
and
it
get
out.
one. That's very,
Yeah,
it's just
it's
gonna
Mango
be
good.
You poured somewhere.
pretty
Mango
simple to do.
steam. It's like 14 or 15 bucks for a 4-pack of it.
You probably poured it somewhere.
Yeah, I would eat it for if it's that much.
That's why I bought it. I was like, I want to see what this shit is.
What is it?
I don't know. It was like a slimy
Here we go.
tangerine.
Boom.
That's the closest thing I can get to. It was like a
Yeah,
slimy
I'd say
tangerine.
so.
But I was
Did you?
the closest thing I can get to. Like a slimy tangerine.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
You guys all got your 3-star units?
Yeah.
And you gotta place them out?
Awesome.
What do I get?
Wow, you're so fancy. I mean, you got the... That's awesome.
Yeah, I try to make at least some. The problem is, I can't put. I like to put like
That's
second
what we did for
edition in
the stream.
gold because this is from the video game. Because you guys haven't released the artwork technically, I guess I can't find it online for the actual.
I want to get
Box.
in the onesie.
So I was fine with it. And so I just put US
Keep
faction,
crawling
and that's.
over
Well, wait. Yeah, I mean, you did fantastic with the live match one.
Dude, I
That's
literally
like
threw that together
perfect.
like in 2 minutes because I was like, oh crap, we gotta put something.
Yeah, I mean, just do it that way. Just copy and paste that every single time. I don't know if it's attached in layers or how you have it.
Yeah.
Alright, so
Yeah,
that's
you
the
know,
link.
So long, you guys
Spread that around a little bit.
So where are the mortars?
That are interested.
Mortars?
I want to like.
Yeah, we're gonna technically put them in here.
Sick.
Oh my god.
Months ago.
Yeah.
Are these the right guys?
I can't justify.
We need mortars.
No, because I can't justify to myself to buy
Remember,
the
you need
dice
your
at
dice
the very
too.
feeling.
You
I
need
guess
your-
I have to,
Oh,
you know,
that's
I
some
might
good
need them
gummies
in order
over
to
there,
get
huh?
You want
that.
them?
Sounds like the dice
Those
are
are-
really, really
It's
optional.
like
if you
weird
have
flavor
everything.
tree.
Yeah. Those are those
Yeah,
are like
I
the
hate
healthy
waiting
ones.
on any of these.
Did you?
They say ultimate on them. You can put anything
Depends
you want.
on how your group runs into dice
They're
concern
good.
Okay,
The flavors
any
are
three
weird.
units.
Like
So-
they're more
As
tropical.
as well if
Flavored.
you
Okay,
want
this is the
more
first thing complicated. So you need to have
trays or
15 of these
I don't
cubes. Now, technically, with us playing, we're gonna have to use somebody's gonna have to use the orange cubes as actual counters.
Right.
And then somebody's gonna have to use white cubes as actual
That live
counters.
action
Somebody
game,
makes
people
these
love
here
watching
orange.
commentaries. So do
and
I.
then
When
use
I was
white cubes
rewatching,
as
I was like,
mantle
man,
cubes.
Brian.
I was
Because
able, like, first of all, I don't
when
like to
they
hear
first came out,
myself
there
speak,
was only 9 of these.
but
But now
I was
it's
watching, I'm
probably
like, wow,
big
this
cubes
is,
of
I find it to be really engaged. I mean, obviously I'm biased at that point.
Super
so
engaging.
it sounds complicated, but
I thought it was really
some need
engaging.
screens and only
So,
one screens. Some
I
need
was
full red, some
telling
need full
a
yellow,
couple
some need
people
full
that I
black. There's
think,
two people gonna be
you know, I want to do a bunch of,
which is
if
gonna
we
be
can
the
do
yellow
more
lights.
lives,
You choose.
because I think a lot of people want to see different factions and want to see different player counts. I'm going to try to do the live
so-
with...
So what I'm gonna do is, I guess I can just keep the whites. So what I'm gonna do is give her all my whites here. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5. You need 15. Grab the black ones. Get the ones you need. Okay. 2, 4, 6, 8,
So how many did I grab?
15. You need 15. Tim, get your color order.
Yeah, I don't really want to...
And if we need to,
No,
somebody
don't
can
even
use
worry
little
about it
white
because
dice here if you want
it's gonna
to,
be so
but-
niche. Like, who's gonna want to, like, you're only gonna have maybe not even 5% of people want to watch a detailed overview.
2, 4, 6, 8,
That's kind of busy.
10, 12,
That's the more there, isn't it?
14,
It's been so
15.
long.
Perfect.
I know. I feel like I have no idea what the phone doing.
It's all good. It's all good. 5 minutes and you guys
He
can
won't
go.
let us stop. I
He's a grenader.
think so. I don't think that's.
Oh, you need mortars?
No, he says grenader.
Oh, then
It-
you just
it-
probably regular dude.
It's just a regular dude.
Yeah, the regular.
Exactly.
Regular. You don't need a mortar team to
Just a regular dude. Just put dudes in the thing.
Oh, well, how do I
That
tell?
all the candy.
You
That
can
was
do this?
exciting too.
Yeah, it's a good
That was
question.
great.
Jared, let me see. Let me see out.
Robert went on
So,
candy spree.
this guy here?
I was incredibly high last
What's this
week.
guy?
I got the all the candy.
Storm Pine here.
How's he different than that guy?
And more.
Oh my gosh.
But I also I
I
got all
cube?
that
Because
but
this
then I
guy has
also
a
bought
cube
like
here. See his extra cube here?
a ton of
You're gonna add
organic
that cube in.
groceries, just
Ah,
like fruit. I
alright.
was just eating fruit and vegetables.
So I got works right here.
Gotta keep it healthy
Millions
somehow.
and millions.
Well,
It's probably not gonna be an hour because we already know kind of the setup. It's just this one.
And then this is what I
And
actually
if
bought.
there's people asking questions, it's probably gonna go really smoothly.
There we go.
I bought
That is a good question.
healthy stuff. Like, all the things.
Uh-huh.
And then this is the
That guy's nothing. This guy's gonna be fine.
I
I think the green guy.
I ate an entire
Cool
pizza and an
pizza.
entire cheesesteak.
I think that looks good.
That's the problem. I wanted to go. I don't know.
Okay, you got it right? 18 reds?
Grandma's pizza. Square.
Yep. Yes, you
It's like really burnt.
What? You get
My
three
wife's
extra.
got a thing that's used like to my
Sam, what color are you?
baby's
Black?
birthday. I don't know what
Scarf.
spelling
You're gonna
means,
be
but
yellow. I mean, green
Oop.
here, because you're American, right?
Oh, 3:30, man. So I'm not. Yeah, I'm not as worried. I think if we do, I mean, for me, I don't want to have to put a time crunch on
those are
one
extra.
faction. I
Yo,
don't want to do that. 'Cause
Jared,
we want to talk
you're
about
gonna
things,
be
talk
yellow,
about things.
so
The
you're
idea
gonna
is,
take over.
if somebody's gonna watch this video, they're
Tim, you
looking
should have
for those
3 black
conversations.
extra.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
They're not watching.
You
It's not like a
with me?
quick overview. It's
Hey.
hey, here's
Roman,
all
you
the
gotta use
changes
orange cubes as
specifically,
your,
and
actual
why we
orange
did
cubes.
it. It's
No
like
cheese for you guys.
that's a very niche group of people.
I
That's
guess
like me watching
We could
Tightrope
probably just use
explain
those
you know what I mean?
extras as our pizzas, right?
the total damage each
Yeah,
unit
oh yeah, we
outputs
can use
at
anything.
different
Like you can use,
lengths.
you
It's
can
like,
literally use just
a lot of
you
people
can use
care.
the white for your cheese.
but those
Yeah.
that do will
Because
care.
I'm using white for counters.
Okay.
Okay, so
Oh, there they are.
a couple other things that are also in the game. So, who is
EA Sports is in the game.
who's British?
Mhm.
So Tim's. Now we all get the 3 random commanders to start the game with.
Yeah.
So here's 1.
Yeah.
2.
No, you're gonna see because you're gonna be seeing the what do you call it? You're only gonna be seeing the card. Remember, because I'm doing the
Three.
first edition card, so my face is gone.
Okay.
No, you can't look at them.
Who's Americans?
I have no idea, but I'm pretty sure you can.
Ooh,
Yeah, I'm
okay.
gonna do the top
Oh
3.
yeah, yeah. Hold on a second. That's right. That's what I did last time. My bad.
Okay.
Let me.
Who is OPW?
I gotta share screen. That's what I gotta do. Yeah, very simple.
You're German?
Just A.
So these are the only 3 commanders you can choose for in the game.
Boom.
Now once you lock into one,
Oops.
I think
You want the
use those
actual
two.
you want to see the camera or the whole
Yeah,
entire
you can use
tabletop
whatever you
simulator
want.
or just TTS what we're looking at?
But,
Oh, I
yeah,
got a bunch of those too in the fridge.
one.
Good stuff.
Right, you choose
Okay,
random.
what's that?
No, yeah, right. Yep.
I can't pick.
Nope, you don't pick.
I need to do a pop out.
I only like them when they're hard.
Harder.
Yeah.
Is that the fairness of the game or not?
Yeah, it's the rules.
What? Since when?
Since no thing.
Huh?
Roman, did you get your 3?
I don't have any commanders yet.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you, sir.
So if I'm correct, we're gonna get everybody gets 3 random ones now. And once you choose one, once you lock in one, that's it. You're done.
Did you eat the skin too?
Mhm.
What the? That's a new one.
Also, there's another
Yes.
So much
rule.
easier. You can sit there and peel that shit.
There's another update. Who's the Americans? This is you. So you're also gonna get 3 of these.
Okay.
And you, just like the commanders, once you lock in one, you lose the other 2. Now this.
Are you allowed to look at them?
Yeah, you can look at commanders. You have to. Well, when you're playing the game, as soon as you lock in one, whenever you want to, the other 2 get lost.
Okay.
Now, who is
I'm gonna do this.
Tim? I mean,
Hit him with the time.
yeah, do it. Well, you don't know yet. Just hold on to it, just until you find out.
Clock ticking, boys.
I don't know.
Clock
Yeah.
ticking.
Wait, what was the topic?
Clock
No,
ticking.
who's British?
There is the clock.
Roman threw one out.
So this one on a card, on your card, there's also going to be a commander. This is a wild card commander on here. What that means is you can use them whenever you want. He doesn't have to follow the order. But once you lock into one, you lose the other 2 as well.
Which 2?
The other 2. So here's your 3.
So these are like extra?
Yeah, these are extras.
Okay.
So
they
once you
don't
choose
cancel
one-
out These.
Yeah, they don't cancel out these, and you don't need to follow the order to unlock that. That's a that doesn't follow the order. It's just an extra. Roman, you got your 3 yet? Okay. So far, looking like it's moving. And
What do you mean? You have to choose one of them?
yeah, whenever like not you don't choose them now. When you play the game, once you lock in one, you're good. You have it first. That's it. Okay. Also, here is where the biggest change is for the game flow. It's this deck here. It's called Operations deck. I'll explain how it works. Really simple. We're gonna play turn-based this game. So Operations deck is this here. Okay. There is 7 cards in here. Okay. When the team that goes is gonna draw the top one, look at it, and they decide one of the 2 options. So here's the card for you guys to look at. So the one side is
Shabbat. There we go. Hello, hello. Welcome, world. I don't know if you guys were there here on Thursday watching that 1-in-1 live game. That was a wonderful game. I'm so happy to have Brian assist me in the commentary. Great insight from a developer, and I'm just back there hooting and hollering if the dice rolls. But Brian, you want to kind of talk about what the plan is for today, what this video is focused on, and what we're gonna go over?
Review over the US faction, especially in regards to the changes from first edition to second. But I mean, we're gonna, touch on everything that we can that
Yeah.
pertains to how the faction's playing, any, any issues, the play style, that kind of stuff. So, focusing on obviously the building boards and the commanders. But yeah, I mean, we're gonna try to cover as much as we can regarding the US faction.
Awesome sauce. Now, what's nice is if you guys did watch the the commentary playthrough, we watched the faction played, and now we get to talk about the faction here. Maybe we'll make some comments about the playthrough, but yeah, I'm excited to see the changes. Here's Brian's thoughts behind the reasons for the changes and the overall impact they're going to have for this faction in the second edition.
Yeah, with that in note, I mean, you could probably watch a little bit of that and come back and watch this and then go back. Like, if you're really that interested, I don't know the preferred order, especially if you're new to the game, you might want to watch this first. I don't want to necessarily point you there because knowing if you're new to the game, especially this video might help you understand the decision making of the players are making and the choices that they're running into, and then kind of maybe get more feedback as to our commentary regarding their choices.
Right.
So we tried to balance the video, not too strategic and too strategic. We're trying a third time, strategically. There we go. In depth as a live play, because there's a lot of different players of different skill levels. Some new coming in, some even haven't read the rule book yet, just joining us, with the second Kickstarter campaign that's live right now. So again, this one's more video for those that are really interested in getting in deep with the US faction. Like, if you want to learn what's in the 2-player core, we're going to do this one. Our next one that we're looking to do is the Wehrmacht faction, and then we'll finish up with Soviets and OKW, and we'll probably do them. That might be not necessarily today, of course, but we'll try to separate them into their own videos. So whenever you're ready to dig deep.
Oh yeah, so let's get started. And if you guys have questions, you're more welcome to ask. And we're gonna go through the building boards first, which I'm very interested to see. The British had a lot of changes that was made earlier, and let's get to the American faction first building board. On the right here, it's kind of small. Maybe I'll make it a little bigger. Let me actually make that bigger for you guys so you guys can actually see a bigger screenshot of it. Boom. There we go.
You could try trim me a little bit differently. There's a little black above my head, but it's up to you.
Boom.
I'm sure these people watching this
Everybody's
video
looking good. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, just that spiffy,
Yeah. So this is the
all right. No, go ahead.
On the right, this is the first edition building board, and then on TTS, which you guys are watching on screen, is the actual updated version. And so, I going through it, looking over earlier, the rifleman cost stays the same. The top is exactly the same. The bottom is exactly the same, all for the exception of you reduce the munitions by 1 for the munition upgrade for the infantry section here.
Yeah, so early on in testing, this actually went through a lot of different waves, and particularly regarding to the XP. So that's kind of the first thing I want to touch on. Obviously, the one that changed looks more important, right? That munitions cost. But I want to start with the experience, because even though it's the same, it kind of, for a lot of units, the XP upgrades went down.
Yes.
Early on in second edition, because we were looking at adjusting the experience system. But for US, it kind of stayed the same for much of it, but we did experiment a little bit with the ones, and this was one that was hard to find the right balance for, because you're going to see, well, especially if you get a chance to play the game, but maybe in some other videos, we didn't really see it. I'll reference the other video as well, so if you do watch it later or have already seen it, I'll try to weave it in without too many spoilers. But you kind of, bye-bye, Persephone. So in the video, you didn't see Rudy really but Rudy was the U.S. player, so if you mention
Mhm.
if I ever reference Rudy, it's in this context about him playing the U.S. faction in that 1v1 game, but he didn't really take advantage of the rifleman. So the rifleman, I'd say the U.S. Let's start out here is that it's really a beginner-friendly faction, and the U.S. is really about mobility and firepower. So looking at this rifleman, you have 2 ores. This is like someone who's familiar with the game is like, wow, how is this not the best unit in the game?
Mhm.
Because it starts with an AI damage rifleman. It can get an XP upgrade for a second additional, second AI, and then for a third AI, you can get the munitions upgrade. So
Right.
you can, of course, you can pick which one you want. So if you have munitions, you can get a second AI there, and then later get the experience upgrade for the third anti-infantry damage. But riflemen, that's basically just like the video game. It's the bar munitions upgrade that they have in their base that they can grab. But to throw it into perspective here, that's 3 AI damage, and that's going to really threaten any infantry throughout the entire game. And
Yeah.
you have that option very early on for US that other factions just do not have, maybe at all. Some of them, like especially British, they don't have any infantry option that can really threaten that at all. So having that option for the US, like if you're a fan of the US, especially once you've learned the game, it's probably because of the versatility of the rifle.
Yeah.
To be honest,
And
yep, go ahead.
and I mean, I playing the Americans. I love getting riflemen. They're just like you just said, very versatile. That was even the first and the second edition. The reduction here makes them even more desirable to be out in the field.
Yeah, now swinging to that upgrade exactly. So now that upgrade, it's a no-brainer. I mean, playing this faction, it's almost impossible to not grab those upgrade. Either the munition side, especially with either the armor piercing or the anti-infantry. It's just a great option for your munitions, resource. Early game, mid game, late game, just whatever problem you have. Just very flexible and inexpensive. And I mean, and as kind of a counter note that we're going to touch on probably multiple times throughout this video is all this firepower does not make up for the US's biggest weakness, which is that it doesn't have a great unit at capturing points. So they don't have a 5 health infantry. They don't have their Willie's Jeep doesn't have any defense upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
So they struggle late game. Again, don't want to have spoilers for what happened in that other video. But Rudy may have had some concerns with capturing points because of the lack of riflemen, lack of having a Jeep that can actually take a few hits.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be a concern. So you have to. That's kind of where the skill, like they're very easy to learn because they're going to be very easy to trade with opponent factions. So that's kind of where you're going to kind of see as a resounding theme repeated again and again throughout the faction. So again, there's an easy faction, and that's their focus. So any other comments on the rifleman?
No, I mean that's exactly what it is. They're very versatile, and just like in the video game in here, you have to be really smart with how you do your upgrades. Because if you go too much anti-tank, you'll have Panzer Grenadiers that can actually put a crazy fight against. If you go too much anti-infantry, then you can have light vehicles and tanks then become. But that's the versatility of them. And
Right, exactly. Not to interrupt you too much, but that note is exactly right. If you see someone, you don't want to just say, "Look, I'm playing US. Let me just grab these upgrades because they're there." I think that's kind of one of the biggest traps for US players early is I have these options. Let me just go for it, and it's not quite that simple. I mean, they are the easiest faction, but if the enemy doesn't have any infantry over there, you probably don't want to get 2 AI upgrades, right? So it's not
Yep.
just you're looking more as kind of a strategy a little bit in depth here. If you have a rifleman in a center building in like the center of the map, that's a perfect one. Even you don't want really that rifleman to capture things, right?
Mhm.
Because you don't want that one taking damage per se. You want to kind of save that rifleman out there to basically save the CP on that rifleman wait for the opponent to make a move, and then react with that rifleman. So that's not
Yeah.
the one that you really want capturing points. That's the one that you want to keep alive till late game, so that you can force the opponent infantry into bad spots and just basically outdamage them.
Yeah, and I like that. I like the Rifleman. It's like one of the few infantry units from building one that can play very well throughout the whole game. The only downside I have with them is obviously they're 2 range, but I don't think any infantry have 3 range in the first building.
Yeah, not a core out of the gate without
Yeah.
any. Well, the Volks Grenadiers, but that's a specialty case. That's kind of a specialty infantry for
Mhm.
OKW that we'll touch on later.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And so, and as we go later on, you're gonna notice that riflemen really need backup. They need supporting infantry in the back to really put the touch in if you really want to use them fully, whether it's an MG or mortars, tanks. But yeah, we'll get to that. Mortar team here. I don't have any more questions about riflemen. Not too much changes other than a reduction of munitions here. It's a small change, but it will actually cause big impacts. If you start with 3 rifleman units, that pretty much is a free upgrade on one of them compared to the first edition, where it was 4 munitions for each one. Mortar team is next. Look over this. You did health same damage. You did add the symbols for can't be transported, cannot deploy in transports, cannot enter buildings. No reduction in manpower, but you did remove the HE damage and gave it a splash instead here.
Yeah. So we didn't actually touch on Splash with the British overview, but Splash is kind of one of our. I'll just be honest with that. I know because you're not the biggest fan of it, perhaps yet, but maybe if you see it more in play, because I don't know if you've played too many games since the change to Splash. But the
Yes.
big change with Splash is that we were looking for a specific situation. Actually, I was actually inspired from watching your big 3v3 and 4v4 games, and seeing this one game where you had a Sturm Tiger kind of scare, like there was this big cluster of enemy troops, and then this OKW Sturm Tiger that actually had the splash before this change, even with just one HE splash, kind of have such a big, awesome impact in the field. And the enemy players may not have liked it, but just watching it, I was like really excited to see this.
Yeah.
So just how much impact it can have. So the splash change, it was kind of, I don't want to spend too long on it, but we're probably going to want to touch on it in each of these overviews, because we are seemingly going to go with this change because it does open up a lot of strategic and tactical value that just wasn't there before the change. We were
Right.
considering dropping splash or leaning into it, and it was because in first edition there wasn't that much of it. So there was a few key units here and there, but it was almost like, why have a rule? Can we just cut this?
Mm-hmm.
Is it like, how often is this mattering in games? I mean, after playing in nearly 100, watching another 100, like how many games can I say was impacted by splash other than that one I watched with that Storm Tiger? I mean,
Right.
one out of that many. Is it really that interesting? Probably not. So
Yes.
again, why make people teach this rule? Let people just play the game and have fun,
Yep.
So what this does is Slava's kind of setting up
Yep.
You're setting up a perfect example here. So splash, it's a small block of text in the rule book, but it is a little bit to analyze and digest. There is one exception that it's kind of an abuse case that we probably don't need to touch on in this video, of someone trying to trigger it for their own friendly units when they're in a building. I'll just leave it there for this. You can kind of read the rule and ask questions with it. Someone already has before when they actually read it in the Discord. But so perfect example. Obviously, this example is this one mortar team firing on their own units, but that's fine. It's perfect for this example.
I can't change the color. Yep.
Yeah. Just assume they are the enemy units. But you can kind of see here this kind of mortar being able to target that center unit there, right? Kind of like he has with the mouse pointer. And splash is gonna, whenever you roll the HE, it's basically
Here we
the
go.
splash upgrade. Yep. Now turns all the HE damage. That's a perfect example that you rolled red though.
Oh, red. Okay.
So,
Red's the worst example. Let me re-roll that.
I think it's the best example because someone concerned that it's too strong doesn't. The one damage that is not deterministic in this game is high explosive. So having splash be always attached to high explosive damage does make it that gamble. It does make it not reliable as a damage source. So it allows us as kind of a designer and kind of a game in terms of balance. Hey, if I have this splash and I can't rely on it, a lot of the game is about the deterministic damage.
Yeah.
So hey, look, I'm throwing anti-infantry at your infantry, and it doesn't have any cover. It's gonna definitely take that damage.
Mm-hmm.
So in this scenario, perfect example, it doesn't roll anything, so nothing happens. Now with the new experience system, this is actually where US shines. As you're learning US, this is why this is a great beginner faction, because their infantry aren't high. Basically, they're not very high terms of defensibility and sustainability, that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. But this mortar unit, a lot of people may not want to go a mortar unit, but how cheap they are in the second edition now, you can kind of look. Well, yeah,
I'll show you. Yep. Let's get
just
to it.
quick. It's only 1 XP for the splash upgrade, and you're gonna get that back almost guaranteed. Because if they're clumping up, you target multiple units now. You're just now targeting here. You're gonna get 3 experience. So that upgrade pays for itself.
Yeah.
If you run into this scenario, so that's kind of great with the new experience system to really encourage this style to soften up targets for US. So it really opens up a play style for US to really bring that. This isn't a high damage unit because it used to in first edition have 2 HE. Now it's one of the only mortars that only stays at 1 HE and splash, but the upgrades are very inexpensive.
Yeah.
The speed die, 2 munitions, the splash upgrade, only 1 XP. And we are allowed to do that coming in from like a really detailed designer perspective because it only gets 1 damage, 1 threat of HE. So yeah, it could roll a crit for 2, but it doesn't have 2 HE damage that could crit for 4.
Right. And
So
another thing is, I want you to. I know maybe first edition or people aren't understanding. Experience points is in the old edition was how many units did damage to. New editions, how many units you have the potential you assign damage to. And the reason why Brian's saying you get 3 XP because even though the splash damage assigned to this hex here, he technically is also potential to do damage here and here. So that will actually be included with that experience points. That's why they're getting the 3 here.
Perfect point.
Because the potential to damage both of these. That's why it's huge with 1 unit, 3 XP. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, just to finish that little point, essentially now the damage phase process is you assign damage, collect experience, because again, that damage doesn't need to hit. So this HE missed, you still get that 3 experience before you even roll the HE die. You already get that 3 experience. So hit, miss, crit, doesn't matter. So now going into the perfect, you got a laid out great example here. For
Yeah,
now,
I did because I wanted to get the cover system here and land cover and also a random thing here.
Battlefield defense, yeah.
Should probably put it next to the building, but yeah. Actually, let me put it next to the building so it's the best scenario possible.
Yeah. All you have to do
Here
is
we
move
go.
that. Oh, that's great. Yeah, and then you can just move 1 into the building, perhaps of the.
I'm gonna put 1 here because I want that cover there so we can talk about.
Yeah, you could perhaps just add a 4th into the building. There
Oh,
you go.
okay.
Awesome.
So
Let's scroll a little bit to the right. Yep, awesome.
Okay.
So
let's roll. Hopefully, it actually hits this time. Another miss.
And this is it. This is your life with high explosive damage. For anyone concerned that Splash is broken, watch this video. So, and now another note, perfect note here in second edition, the dice, that side is going to be black. It's not going to be green anymore, which matches the new system that HE only crits on the high explosive symbol, which is the only green symbol with the new dice. So a lot of people are going to use those update pack dice. Again, all you need is the update pack, and you'll get these dice. And I would recommend using those for when you roll HEs in particular. So in this example, again, it's only 1 damage. Now, the key thing with Splash is it ignores any cover lines. So
we're talking about
the
here, right here.
Yep. So the one on the left normally would get 1 cover from the yellow, basically the forest, the lake cover there, doesn't get it from the Splash. The battlefield defense, there wasn't 2 damages. Well, there's 1 also on the left, the tank trap. You kind of have it on the line there. Hard to see in TTS and everything, but that is, especially with that color. So it would even if the HE crit, that wouldn't be gone because it's about damage assigned now. It's It's a lot simpler in second edition with these battlefield defenses. No extra dice ever have to be rolled.
Mhm.
First edition AI it had a chance to block. It was just very hard to remember. It was kind of fiddly, clunky, whatever you want to say. It was very hard to remember to roll it. So now it's just very easy on the assign. You just kind of note it. Hey, look, that's gone, and you can kind of almost put it aside, at least in your head. The sandbags. You want to note that unit normally would get the 2 defense dice. In this case, if this is the only attack, it wouldn't, because even the sandbags on the right, the HE splash. Once you add the splash, it ignores the cover.
Mhm.
So again, this mortar isn't that high damage potential, but it allows you, if you're planning properly with the US, have the rifleman that's maybe up in the front attacking some other unit, and then you can have the mortar splash those clumpy units that's, perhaps on the other side of the rifleman, not where that rifleman's targeting.
Mhm.
You can really that's kind of the US's game plan. Really get that damage out there very easily, damage units, soften them up for the following round to get the kills.
Yeah.
Looks like a question came up. If we have a mortar team, upgrade with a second HE to the end, only have 1 soldier left, do you have 2 HE damage? So in this case, that's a perfect example for the Soviet mortar, perhaps. But so that mortar is kind of a little bit more tuned to perhaps answer this question. I think if I'm misunderstanding you, let me know. But in this scenario, the U.S. only has 1 HE, but the Soviet mortar instead can get a second HE and can get a splash. So in that case, if it gets a splash upgrade, all of the HE damage becomes splash now in second edition. So that's the big change. So you can awesome that Slava's pulling it out as I'm just
Pulling it out. Yeah.
as I'm kind of going over it. In that the Soviet mortar can do 2 HE splash is kind of how I describe it. I kind of just tack on the word splash to describe it. So awesome that he's got it out here. So you could see their upgrades on the Soviet mortar are more expensive, especially that 2 XP for an HE die. So it can get 2 HE splash, but it doesn't have that speed die. And speed dice are actually very, as you play, it's probably hard to describe if you haven't played the game yet, but speed dice are very critical with weapon teams because they always have to spend a CP to pack up and to set up. So usually with weapon teams, once you set them up, if you don't have that speed die, it's very hard to keep readjusting them round after round after round because it's too even to adjust their arc. And then if you don't have a speed die, you can only pack up, move 1 hex, and then set up again for 3 CP, or just obviously readjust, like I said, in your current hex for 2. So that speed die gives you a little bit more flexibility there for US. So again, that's kind of why it's the easy faction to play. They're the easiest mortars to play because they're able to kind of keep up. If you're really pushing the board on one side, take advantage of that speed die. It doesn't look flashy, but in the game, that's all about command points, these CP cubes being limited. Sometimes the mobility is more important than the damage, and I think with the US mortar, it really is. So in that case, yeah, you would roll 2 in the mortar example, hopefully to answer your question fully. The Soviet mortar, if it had both the HE and the splash upgrade, it would roll 2 HE damage, and that would be applied to all of the units in those 7 hexes, including your own. So that's one thing we didn't note on with splash is that it does also trigger friendly fire. If someone's in that hex because of an assault of your unit, again, they would take the damage. So normally with HE, you actually only pick the enemy unit. But if there's an assault there with splash, your unit in that assault would also get the damage.
Yeah.
So there's really no longer any exceptions. It bypasses the cover on the board. But the buildings are still safe from splash. I just want to touch on that last thing. Hopefully that answers all questions with splash. We can probably maybe note that in the video because there's actually I kind of posted on BGG afterwards for people to find these. But maybe I'm going to probably in those posts kind of maybe detail out, maybe when I have time in the future, come back to those, rewatch them and give timestamps to kind of point out these things to people. Because there's a lot of different things that we're going to be able to introduce. And they're actually very important when you come into this detail of the faction overview. Because as one last note with the splash that you're going to see is that every faction has access to splash on 1 core unit out of their 9 units now. So it's
Yeah.
very integrated into your strategy. And as the final point, I promise with the splash, the goal with the splash is really to, when you run into the situation, like as you kind of see on the board, if there's 4 enemy units clumped up in first edition, and even before this change, you're just losing units. If you try to go and deal with that, you send any unit towards that,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't really have a solution. You were at best trading units. If you send in any infantry unit, a conscript for Soviets, whatever, right? You were losing that unit. There wasn't any choice. So now it gives you that option if you have a spotter, if you're in a building perhaps, but you can't, obviously that one unit's not going to be able to damage everything. The splash really gives you that tactical option to kind of discourage it from your opponent. Again, perhaps soften up targets, maybe even get multiple kills in a round, which again isn't really common without splash when they're clumped up like this. How are you going to have the damage to damage all these units? I mean, looking at the board, there's the 3 health and the 3 4s. That's 15
Yep.
points of damage you need.
Yeah.
How are you going to get that very easily? So again, that's kind of why splash is kind of that tool now in second edition that you can kind of use. And actually, US will actually touch on it later with the major. The major also, they're the one faction that actually has 2 splash upgrades,
Mm-hmm.
2 options in their kit. So
Yeah.
that's kind of their specialty. Is really again that damage, soften up targets, finish them off. US really excels at this.
Yeah.
So
And just to be clear, so I actually changed the figures to make it even more clear. The Soviet mortar is with splash. It has a range of 5, 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So his max range here, he rolled 1 HE damage. Now splash only works, also to be clear, with units that you have line of sight of. So in this case here, the guys in the building would actually take absolutely nothing because there's no line of sight of it, because sight of 2.
correct, yeah.
That's something I also want to let you guys know, because there's no sight. He doesn't have the sight for the guys in the building here. Even if this guy was standing, if he was standing here, this unit, because he has sight of 2, these 2 units would not take any splash damage because they're
Right.
not in sight. That's another little
Awesome.
caveat thing that I want to mention. So, but if you're standing here, you will take damage because you're in the splash range, and that's splash damage your own faction. So there is
No,
balancing
great
parts to
example.
it. Yeah.
Really great example. There, like I said, reading that paragraph. If you read anything in there in the rule book, have any questions, please let us know. Any of our channel, comments, Discord, BGG, any of these videos that you're watching, live. Ask any of these questions because we'll be certainly glad to answer them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of the options. So you can kind of see Splash is really packed in, way more valuable, way more critical into your decision making in this game now. So
Yeah.
some might like it, some may not, and that's fine. I mean, it's fully understandable. But as a designer, really, we're finding an issue with enemy units, especially in those team games. Again, touching back finally on that team game before we move on to
Mhm.
the Jeep. But touching on those team games, we're finding like enemy line here, stalemate, and factions weren't really able to break that or push that or try to discourage the enemy from just kind of doing that stalemate line of long range units, like someone just massing mortars, not really, anything that walked into it was just getting blown up.
Yeah.
There wasn't really a counter to that clumpage. So
Yeah, so really quickly, let's say the Soviet has splash, rolls this dice. You know what I mean? Let's say he hits with 1 HE damage. We have a Soviet unit here. He can see everybody. Let's go through. This is pretty much every case scenario I can think of when splash would apply. Who would take the damage, first of all?
this is great. Yep, because that one would take the damage.
So he'll go down 3 from the 1 HE damage.
No defense dice.
Yep,
The one on the left,
right here.
basically over here at 9 o'clock, if you're thinking about a clock, that one, again, no defense dice, that would take the damage.
Even though, and guys, just be aware, even though there is yellow like terrain cover here, splash pretty much makes that what do you call it, negates it, I guess. What's a good word for there?
It just ignores cover. That's kind
Yeah.
of what it says in the rule book. That's really it. It just ignores cover.
Ignores cover.
Yep.
Now, your own faction, because Soviets have attacked, they would also take 1 damage going down to 2 because they're in the splash range here. These guys here, even though there's a sandbag, how much damage do they take, Brian, with the sandbag?
Again, just the same as everybody else.
Okay. And
All the
that's
infantry.
something to be aware of, pretty much any cover in that sense. This Jeep here, he would have to, what would he take?
Now, because vehicles get a defense die from high explosive damage, both heavies and light vehicles, it would get a defense die.
Yeah, and so this Jeep would pretty much roll, and
So that could be
boom.
rolled for the Jeep and it misses. So
And
there
it
you
takes
go.
the
I mean,
damage.
this is a very impactful high explosive example.
Yeah.
And then the one in the building, 3
Yes.
defense dice.
And
So
why
that's
is
okay.
that? Why is it that? And here's where I want to get confusion, because we had this where a
Yep.
lot of confusion going. We do see green cover here, so we're all, and we know we don't get defense dice here or here because of the placements or the terrain. Why do these guys in the building get 3 defense dice?
I mean, that's really just a balance decision, to be honest. It's to help encourage buildings. I think people are going to think it's thematically accurate, right? Like if there's an explosion going on outside the building, I should be safe in the building. You know, that kind of mindset. So I think it's just more of a thematic and balance situation where, hey, there's an explosion going outside. The building doesn't collapse, and I'm hiding behind a wall. It should, you know, because you got to think of it. If you're inside the building, there's kind of you're usually protected from a blast outside from multiple directions, right? Whereas a sandbag, there's going to be still shrapnel and things flying
Yeah.
around. So I think people are going to expect that. I think it's more of a kind of intuitive and balance situation. So
Correct. And this building will take 1 damage from the HE splash, going up from 3 to 2 health. And then these guys will get to roll 3 defense dice. And we'll just do that here just to finish it off and see how much damage they take. And they block 2 damage, so they take nothing. That's pretty good breakdown. I think questions might come up, but yeah, I don't think there could be another scenario that we could use on. Another fun thing about Splash, which is kind of annoying, which I don't like. Technically, mortars can't attack units in front of them, but they could, as a little hack, decide to do an HE damage here.
yeah,
And this, always to roll his dice. You know what I mean? Let's see if I can get it.
yeah, that's another advantage of Splash.
Another miss.
Yeah,
So,
that,
but
that
yeah.
another miss. Another thing to point out. Even though you hate
Another
it, it's
miss.
not reliable.
Yeah,
Look at that.
2
Yeah.
misses.
You live and die
Okay.
by the AT. That's what we say.
Yeah, so now, because of damage here, the Splash will actually hit these guys. Mortars in the past could never attack adjacent hexes. Here, that gives them a way to actually still attack guys adjacent to them.
Right, to extend that slightly, again, mortars have a firing arc now in 2nd edition. It's kind of a keynote we didn't really touch on in this video.
That's correct, yeah.
With the firing arc, same way as Slava is showing you in this example, that mortars normally can't attack that adjacent hex because it's kind of grayed out on the card in both 1st edition and 2nd. You can still see it on the screen there on the 1st edition card. So mortars normally can't attack adjacent, but with Splash, kind of like he's saying, they could target 2 hexes away and splash to that one that's adjacent.
Yeah.
So it gives you that option. So the Splash gives you that. And it kind of also, in the same manner, widens your firing arc because you could hit something, you know, that's just outside your firing arc by splashing that one adjacent to it. But again, friendly fire, if the enemy's weaving their units in combined with yours, you're going to have a hard time saying, do I want to damage my own? A lot of times you're going to be sacrificing that unit, even if that damage wasn't enough, right? Your damage is probably going to push it over the top. So
Exactly. Yeah, and just to be aware, there was the mortar change. I want to make notice. All mortars now have 5 range. I think in the 1st edition, it was only Soviets had 5. Now all mortars have 5 range. That's including the the adjacent range that you can't attack. So
correct, yeah.
because in the 1st edition it only had 4 range, and that is huge. So this mortar team with 5 range can technically also, another caveat, you know, it has a range of 5. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He can actually, because of Splash, actually, if there's sight, this mortar team could potentially actually hit 6 hexes away.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, so not only the width on the firing arc, but also that length. So it does give you a lot of flexibility there.
So if you're looking from the spawn point here, that is more than halfway across the map. I mean, that's pretty crazy. All right. So that's the mortar. Another thing was you guys reduced the speed die cost by 2 munitions, which is huge.
Yeah, so you'll kind of see as we're going through all the factions that 2 munitions is generally the standard, especially for infantry. We just want to really offer that option comparatively to the damage upgrades, because the damage upgrades are really the one kind of, I don't want to say issue with these kind of low numbers, but it really is, that's kind of the best way to describe it, is again looking at the rifleman as a perfect example. Going from 1 AI to 2 is 100% increase. It's doubling that unit's damage potential. So to offset that power giving someone a speed die is strong, very strong. People love the speed dice, but it's kind of just balancing it out with the numbers. So
Yeah. Very nice. Okay, any more comments about the mortars? I mean, that splash. I think if I had somebody have a video like that explain splash, when we were playing it, it was still like being touched up in rules and this and that. So that pretty much will cover everything. That splash. Thanks. That's you guys
That's
got a little
great to
bonus
have.
for
Yeah,
this
we did
faction.
that.
Yeah, little bonus for the faction. Okay, the Jeep here. One thing I did notice about the Jeep, which I was like, pretty much doubled its firepower, was health is the same. You guys reduced the fuel on it by 1, which allows the Americans to tier up faster for the buildings. But you've also added a 1 extra AI damage that wasn't in the original unit, giving it more actual versatility now compared to the first edition, which I am a huge fan of this. I really like seeing that.
Right. It actually, to touch on, obviously, the very first thing I want to touch on with this Jeep is it really allows either the Jeep to kind of act like it's just throwing that 50 cal in the back, like the picture showing. It's really trying to emphasize that kind of, again, that the focus of the U.S. faction on that firepower.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just send a Jeep off on its own to hunt down infantry, to hunt down enemy weapon teams.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have that defense die, as we'll see later with the Soviets, but it's a very versatile, flexible unit. You keep it with the rifleman. You throw a rifleman inside. You transport
Correct.
again. It has transport out of the gate. Didn't have it at all in first edition.
Yes.
Just a reminder, quick, all tier 1 light vehicles have transport now. So it can transport, the rifleman can hop out. Just picture this, the rifleman getting an AI upgrade, the Jeep getting an AI upgrade. That is 4 anti-infantry damage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if that enemy infantry is in a building, it's at least taking 1 decent chance to take 2 or 3 or wipe
Yep.
right out.
Yep.
So again, that US focus, other factions just don't have this damage potential out of their tier 1.
Yeah, out the gate. And you can make a Jeep literally be a tank in a way if you have infantry guys, riflemen with 2 armor piercing damage on there. Pretty much.
Yeah, and the last note, right, yeah, with that XP upgrade, the reinforce,
Yep.
riflemen having the wrench, they can reinforce and repair each other when they're adjacent. So you just kind of see that synergy, kind of that combined arms approach.
Yeah, which I really, really like. I do like the fact that you also have to pay now to get the reinforcement upgrade. Because out of the gate, it's super, like reinforcing is strong. Because one of the things, the more you play Company Heroes, the more you realize you don't want to be retreating too much. You want to be, the more aggressive, I won't say too aggressive, but the more aggressive player normally will win. If you watched the game yesterday of Chris, I think Chris only retreated the 1 MG unit. Other than that, he was pretty aggressive off the bat.
Exactly, and he retreated at the end of the second round, and because of the retreat rule is he could have had it back and play in the third round, as we kind of know in the video. So that's a key thing to note, exactly like Slava's saying. If you're pushing forward, you don't have to be as afraid to take damage. You just throw down sandbags, and even if you take a damage, you have the Jeep right next to you. And the coolest thing about it is because the upgrade comes before any reinforce is triggered, you can get that, you can be reactive with this upgrade because it's not a flashy upgrade, let's be honest. Like it's going to be very hard to see in the future and say, oh, I'm going to definitely need reinforce. So now in second edition, it's huge quality of life improvement here. You're saying, oh, I don't get it out of the gate anymore, but you don't need it always.
Yes.
You know, so now you can wait. You're going to get at least 1 damage because I'm for sure you're probably targeting something and you get 1 for free anyway, right?
Yep.
So then with that Jeep, you could say, oh, my adjacent rifleman took 1 damage. It's a no-brainer. Let me just grab the reinforce upgrade for 1 XP. Boom, the rifleman heals back up 1. It just allows such, again, easy play, quality of life, and just really encourages this combination of combined arms.
Yeah, which is super nice. The more the vehicles on the battlefield, on the front line, the more enjoyable it is. Oh man, I love it. Okay, I think that's it for the building tier 1 building.
Yep.
Let's go to tier 2 and let's see what happens here. What are the changes for the tier 2? All right.
Sure, just as we touched on, you don't even have to show it. For those that watch the British video, also US, just as a quick note before we go to tier 2, could skip tier 2 in first edition, and they did lose it just like the British did. It was kind of on the back of the tier 3 building. It kind of had it in the first edition. A little note, they could pay 1 extra fuel. to basically skip tier 2. So we are seeing again early on in second edition, no matter how awesome we made these tier 2 units, that choice was just so enticing to skip, and it was just really hard to balance. So yeah, US did lose that, but looking at these tier 2 now as we're going to go into it, a lot more interesting.
Yeah, and man. So, and let's compare. Let's compare. These now, they had nowhere as close as changes as the British, so, but good changes still. Here we go. Let's start off the MG. As we noticed in the first edition, you had to buy a sight and range upgrade. All MGs now come with the sight upgrade and have the +1 range off the bat. That's a really nice fix because the Overwatch, the change in the pinning, which we got into on the British side, we're not going to get to this time. Also, the nice symbol here saying you can't deploy while in transport. I know the question kept coming up in the first edition all the time. But the two upgrades that were switched out for the MG was, which we've seen, I mean, let me tell you something, Rudy played extremely well with this. Getting the flame upgrade for the MG, which just allows you to really harass units and light vehicles, and the speed dice, which allows them to be extremely mobile. And that's one thing I think I really like about the Americans. Like the key supports, which is the MG and the mortar, really quick. They might not be the most strongest, but you can really quickly field them, and you can, in a way, use them to capture points if worse comes to worse, because that's speed dice. So, and if you watch that match with Rudy, you will see this flame upgrade come into play consistently in the game, and that was threatening Chris the whole time. It actually was the reason why one of the buildings collapsed in a way, because he kept burning it. But
yeah, I mean that's kind of an edge case, right? I mean it's thematically, but so what it's trying to those really diehard historians. There was some incendiary rounds, but it really is to try to show that firepower of the 50 cal and how impactful it was at especially armor penetration and defense penetration against light cover and kind of thing. So that's why it's there for those wondering why it's like, oh, how are they? They're not a flamethrower unit, so that's kind of those kind of concerned with that flame upgrade. So in second edition, we kind of have a couple edge cases such as this one, where it represents what we're calling like true damage or special damage now, where it's kind of an edge case where it's not. We don't want to make the game complex and have this extra damage type for only a couple units in the entire game when there's dozens and dozens of units.
Yep.
Where the flame damage really matches up actually in terms of how we want it to behave. So this is just a perfect example here. And kind of like Slava touched on, Rudy really used that in that video. If you haven't watched it or have watched it, you can kind of see just threatening that damage. It ignores defense.
Yep.
So flame is just, that's another thing that we tried to have a flame option on each and every faction. And this is kind of the US's option for that. As you can kind of see, Slava's kind of got it covered with his own thing. So you just have to slide a little bit more to the right. There we go. So you can kind of see flame just flat out, no defense dice. Doesn't damage heavy vehicles. Heavy vehicles are immune. There's that little ice chart on the bottom that's been added. So those that play on the ice maps now, you can see that. Stalingrad, if you get the legacy map pack, I don't want to touch too long, but it's really, I really tried to make that that's kind of a complaint about Stalingrad. There was too much ice, second edition. It's not that impactful. A lot of people just were not playing with
this Stalingrad right here. This is second edition right here, correct?
Half of it is.
Oh,
the left panel. This is kind of a new map that I'm working on as part of the Kickstarter stretch reward.
Very nice.
That I'm going to do a video for sometime soon. But so you can kind of see that flame really specializes in that. So the USMG really has a lot of flexibility with one AI and another flame, where in first edition, it was hard. So another thing we actually want to point out again, this is US's unit as you kind of look at their costs, second edition. This is US's 3 manpower unit. They're 3 power infantry. Kind of we discussed on British. They have the AT gun. US has the MG. So this is kind of it's very much a go-to unit with US. As Rudy did in that video, it's again, spoily, but not really. It's fairly early on at the end, going into round 2, at the end of round 1, he purchased both an MG and a Jeep, which now in second edition, you can put weapon teams in vehicles, in transport vehicles. So that's a very common US strategy you're going to see in games, and you can probably do yourself when you're playing US to get that MG in a critical spot. So again, very easy faction. They don't have it out on the board. They kind of get that chance to react with a very common US combo of the Jeep and MG to kind of get it to a critical spot on the map to defend it. So if they want to push
Yep.
on one side, you can get this MG and Jeep to defend another side. You're going to see that very common in US play because it really gives you that flexibility to defend and hold down a spot
Hmm.
from where the enemy is sending their infantry to prevent captures.
Yeah, super nice, super nice. I do like the change. Speed dice as much. It's so needed for support units that want to be more versatile, and the flame almost makes them the most versatile MG unit because you always want to flame upgrade wherever possible. Because the only thing that's
Exactly.
threatening you is a tank then, and it's guaranteed damage because flame goes through all cover too. So that's another thing. Even if you're in a building and you get a flame damage, even if you roll 3 defense dice, you will still take 1 flame damage. Yeah, so it's like a very special. I would say special damage, not flame. Yeah, I should probably say
Yeah.
that, Brian. Yeah,
It's
one.
fine. I mean, we already described it. So.
Yep. AT, what's super interesting is, and a lot of people don't realize this, you can actually transport the anti-tank gun because it is a green health unit. And I'm very happy to put the symbol on here. A lot of people don't know this. The anti-tank guns can be transported. And
They
also,
can be transported. That icon is just to clarify, can't be deployed in it. So you
yes.
transport it, but they can't set up while they're in the
Yep.
Jeep. Think of it like this way: the Jeep's just on the hitch; it's just towing the AT gun. Think of it thematically. That's kind of actually usually how AT guns were moved, especially across large distances. Especially as we get to the bigger and bigger AT guns historically. 57, I think, was kind of borderline. I don't know how many men it took to push it, but it was starting to get that. That one I think was in the fringe in between.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that's to help clarify. Can enter buildings and cannot deploy in transports, but it can be transported.
Yeah. That's very. I do like those symbols there. It definitely got it. I think it's not all ATs, but it had a range upgrade added to it. Now it's got 4 range instead of 3 in the first edition. And it has also same upgrade here for anti-armor piercing, which is great, giving it 3. But this is where it gets super interesting. You guys switched from 2 munitions defense dice to a 3 munition camouflage dice, making it untargetable unless you're adjacent to it.
Yeah, that's really so. US's game plan now. Again, every faction, just as a quick note again, each faction does have a camo option out of its core kit, at least on either by default or an upgrade. In this case, it's the munitions upgrade for the AT gun. But it really kind of encourages a very, very aggressive style for US. You have the other the other weapon teams that are especially mobile with the speed dice. The AT gun now is something that you can purchase, move up to in one round, and then still set up with that camo die. It really forces the opponent to say, "Oh man, do I have to counter that with aggression of my own to go spot that AT gun?" It kind of lets you just be way more aggressive and just really pile on the aggression of for US, just that firepower combination
Yep.
with taking aggressive positioning on the board. US just plays naturally so aggressive. We weren't really, again, as a note, we weren't really seeing AT guns in first edition being used.
No,
That range
rarely.
was it was really hard to set up and
Mhm.
use that 3 range. Where now 4 really spreads out with the firing arc and really threaten a good portion of the board. Kind of as you saw with the mortar team going to 5, potentially 6 with splash. 4 we are finding is a sweet spot with AT guns. And the key thing with AT guns is you kind of sometimes, even if they're not going vehicles yet, you might want to get one in advance. That's really the key thing with AT guns is you can start getting one early on because usually the enemy is going to want some vehicles at some point. Infantry are very critical and core to the game,
Yep.
obviously capturing points. AT guns can hard shut down those late vehicle captures that usually come in late game because usually there's a manpower squeeze as you're noticing going into late game where people are going to pick up their version of the Jeep. The US is going to grab their Jeep, of course, to capture points. Kind of again like the video. I wish I saw Rudy do that
Yep.
when he was low on manpower, grab the Jeep to capture points because that's really what wins games. So these AT guns, you just start moving across, a third, halfway across the board, set it up. You're gonna shut down a lot, threaten damage. Usually need a lot. If someone's frontal arc of a heavy vehicle, that damage really helps you add up and get past that frontal arc now in second edition compared to
Yeah.
first edition shipped. The armor is a little bit different, so on heavy vehicles.
Yeah, because the thing was when the A-tank in the first edition, anti-tank had 3 range and 3 health. So like if you had a Panzer Grenadier go against an anti-tank gun, they had the same exact range. The Panzer Grenadier could just pick him off. Mortar teams could pin them down in the first edition. They were really, and you had to set them up with a dice with CP point. They're really hard to move around the board. And the question everybody's always asking, why not just skip it and go to tier 3 and get a tank out? That'll do the same thing. It's more mobile. Here with the range upgrade, now you're not worried about infantry unless they want to come in. And if they're coming in, you have the MG to back you up. You know what I mean? With the 3 range, you'll also have the Greyhound. So they have to now advance on the AT. Not only that, but for the Americans, putting that camouflage on, now they have to be adjacent to you to even do any damage. It's like a really, really good tank hunting unit, a vehicle hunting unit. Just because the camo alone, and if you watch the game of Chris put the camo upgrade on one of his grenadiers, and he really, I wouldn't say controlled, but he really manipulated and just put a big annoyance in Rudy's game that was streamed, where he had that camouflage grenadier, and he was just running around on the left side of the board, capping and running away, and being able to still attack, but none of them could attack them because of the camouflage. But yeah, that's great change there. That really helps them out tremendously. And with this changes, when we were playing second edition, we did see ATs come out more often. It was just very nice. The 4 range, because as 4 range, it's one of the few things with 4 range that can attack with anti-tank damage, armor piercing damage. Unless you have like the Jackson, which we did see in that game with 4 range. Normally a lot of tanks don't come with 4 range. So this allows you to actually push that distance of tanks where you can actually make them come in to attack. And 4 range, I think, was such a good decision for all anti-tank guns. I mean, just beautiful.
Right, and this one is probably on paper the least flashy of AT guns, but in team games, this might be the most valuable one for your US ally to go because of that camouflage. So it can get up to the 3 AP damage. You usually have more units, so it's a lot. Even though it's some ways easier to kind of push a little bit, but it's gonna be you're gonna have to really focus in. Yeah, I mean, comparing it with the Soviets, just quick because he has it out. The Soviet one, 4 HP out of the gate, starts with the 2 AP, costs 5, but it can get up to 4 AP very cheaply. You know, very cheap upgrades there. So for 1 XP and 3 munitions, can get up to the 4, which is huge. The difference between 2 and 3 AP, we were finding 2 and 3, the difference on that armor piercing damage is nice, but that 3 to 4 is to the point where you can seriously damage, if not destroy, enemy heavy vehicles. A lot of them that aren't those high HP vehicles. Any of those soft or medium weight tanks, for instance, can really damage those. So both of those really have their spot to shine.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
We'll see when we get to Soviets to discuss a little bit more. But yeah, that US one, pretty nice in team games.
I do like the US one a lot in team games because of camouflage. And remember, if you have splash damage, and I think that's one exception I forgot. Let's say there's a unit with camouflage.
No, you didn't cover it. Good point. If it's out of sight, but also you have to spot it for the camo.
Yeah. So you would actually have to be. Let's say the splash damage is here, and the Soviet player is. Okay, we'll do this. Make it easier. Because even though the Soviet player has sight here, because he's camouflaged, this splash damage would actually not trigger this unit here, nor will he get the XP for that because he's invisible still. So the only way to be able to trigger that is to be adjacent to it because it is camouflaged. So.
Yep. Awesome. That is like everything. That's your full. Unfortunately, it wasn't with the other part of the video, but it's still great if you watch the whole video. You can see that one that last. I think that's it. Like I don't have it in front of me, but I'm so happy you pointed that out. That's a good thing to point out.
Love the AT. I love the American AT. Even though it might not have the most firepower, the camouflage gives it the most threat. If it's out, unless you're gonna get adjacent to it, unless you're gonna send infantry to get next to it, it can just harass from the back. So nice. Such a good unit. Such a good update to that. And last but not least, did Rudy bring out any Greyhounds? I think there was.
Yeah, Rudy's Greyhound lasted the whole game.
That's right. It's the one that never got kept the.
Oh, we don't want to have a spoil. All right, kind of spoiler.
Let's not spoil it too much. In the first edition to second edition, you increased the range by 1. That's one upgrade, one change you did there.
Yeah.
That really makes it very a lot more threatening. And the 1 range upgrade is huge for people that when you play it, it's night and day difference. That allows you to harass riflemen without them being able to harass you back if you had the range. if you have sight.
if you have someone spotting for you. So
Yeah.
that's the key thing that people might see this, especially learning the game. We want to be careful here. Is units by default have 2 sight range. So even though it can fire 3, it needs something to spot for it. And this is actually a pretty big change that we actually start to see with some factions like the British with the Staghound. Kind of touched on it briefly there. But some units that have some factions that have these light vehicles, these tier 2 light vehicles, this is the new standard. So this allows you to kind of do kind of like he's setting up here with the Greyhound, that you can be at 3 range from your target, and if you have a spotter, you can put damage on that target. We actually saw that in that 1v1 show match
Yeah.
as well. So these light vehicles can maintain their viability into late game, but it's in a different role. So like early when you first get these, some people want to call them like heavy scout vehicles, right? Kind of historically how they're used. But the problem is with this light vehicle defense type, it really falls off late
Mhm.
game. So a lot of feedback was, hey man, I really don't, I love that they're fun vehicles, but they really fall off. And we were kind of analyzing it, and the best solution that we found was to really lean into that. So you kind of see this range sometimes with these vehicles be kind of representative of their little extra speed, if you will,
Yep.
right? So that they were kind of able to get the jump, if you will, kind of on units. So that's kind of what that represents. So these light vehicles, these scout vehicles, not having sight, right? You could argue, you could understand for someone watching this saying, well, shouldn't they have extra sight? Well, no, I mean, thematically that may make more sense, right? But what we're looking for here is fulfilling that role where early game they can kind of go out in front, kind of like you saw in that, if you go watch that match where those vehicles were in the front line, but once they take damage, they kind of take a different role where now they're kind of like a support damage role. They're kind of on the outskirts, a lot more like the video game. In the video game, these units weave in and out of combat using the fog of war, and that's what this represents, that extra range, that they can have a spotter unit, they can come in, get a little jump to throw out their damage, and then get out so they don't get blown up because they're so frail, especially late game against enemy AT guns. Even here, enemy AT guns are just going to blow these things up. They get no defense dice, no frontal armor, nothing against them. So that's why when you see these defense upgrades, that kind of helps with that, but also this range. So to counter that, I want to, as we're going into it, you can kind of see, we can start discussing it. The change now is that the defense upgrade, kind of first edition, it was 2 XP, and then it was kind of what I like to call the no-brainer, two munitions for the HE.
Right.
This was like automatic. There wasn't really a decision here. That's kind of that was the concern. It was a little too automatic at that cost. It was very interesting, and it kind of leaned heavily into that US theme. The problem was it kind of overshadowed any other option for US. It was kind of the no-brainer, really kind of forced to play that style. So now, and again, it's something where looking at it, that you see the 2 AI, you see the HE, and it's really that combination to threaten against an enemy infantry unit. That's a lot of damage potential on an individual unit. Arguably, the US is best against infantry because of that. Because that can, the 2 AI and the HE, they don't really get defense dice unless they have cover enemy infantry. So it really helps, even in a building, can threaten an infantry and an enemy, in a building. So really to balance that, to rein it in, we kind of, push the lever and pull the lever here to adjust its balance so that it shines, but in a slightly different way, and that the defense upgrade, very easy and cheap to get. Again, think of it in terms of experience. Usually comparing it to damage, defense upgrades being a little cheaper gives you that kind of incentive to go that defense because you don't know if someone's going to target you or not. And then the damage being a little bit more expensive. What are your thoughts on that?
And so that's what I mean, and that's what I'm going to show here. So even though this Greyhound has 3 range, this guy he can target because he has 2 sight, 3 range. So here he can take the mortar. Even though he's got 3 range, even though the conscripts are here for 2 health, and he can pretty much wipe it, but because he only has 2 sight and nobody's spotting for him, he will not be able to damage it. You need to have something with sight and range, like this dice here represents, having an extra sight and an extra range, or off the bat having 3 sight. So yeah, and it's great. It's great changes. It really doesn't make him too strong. It doesn't make him too weak. It puts him in a good spot, which is so nice. Man, and it's, I think, one of the few places where you actually increase the munition cost of a unit. I think this is going to be one of the few examples I can think of. All right. Any questions there? We'll continue on to tier 3. Here we go. Let's see the difference here. And I loved the tier 3 for the Americans with that Wolverine in the 1.0 version, the 3 range. It's one of the few tanks to have had it. So let's see what it's looking like here. First things first is the Major. The Major does come into play, and not only does he come into play from the first edition to second edition, but he comes into play in a heavy way. One of the things the Americans struggled with in the first edition, if you played them, was anything with sniper or camouflage. They really did not have a good response to. I think the British were the only ones that had camouflage spotting, but off the bat, the Americans had nothing. Now, if the Major, costing the same, having the same health, you can actually, in the second edition, he does have the ability now, if you upgrade, to actually spot camo units. So this was something that Rudy struggled with in the game because he had the Grenadiers out there, camouflage. And if you brought a Major off this upgrade, you'll be able to spot them out and pretty much kill them. Another.
Not to interrupt you, you have a little bit of an echo right now. I'm not sure, like some double mic issue or headset
Oh boy.
issue that kind of just happened out of nowhere. Not sure.
All right. It goes away. It's still coming on?
Yeah, I'm not sure if some mic got turned on or something, or 2 different source issue. Just started happening though. I don't know.
Let me double check. Interesting.
Are you perhaps? Well, I don't want to. You can't be muted in our call. I'm not sure what it could be though. Other than
All right, is this still happening?
Keep trying.
Micah, check 1 2.
It's reverberating, but it's not echoing. I think it might be okay now.
Interesting. It might have been the camera.
No, I think we'll just have to deal with it. Perhaps it maybe is something picking it up, like your camera, but.
Okay, well, Brian, you'll do more of the talking than me.
I think it's okay. It's not too bad of an issue, but so the U.S. Major, like you said, in first edition, it really looked weird on the building board, to be honest. And not only did it look weird, but it actually kind of played a little bit weird because the U.S. Major was very inexpensive at 3 manpower. You could only have 1. That's kind of that note that you can barely see under the manpower. It's kind of got that asterisk, but it had the 2 AI. 3 health, 2 range.
Yeah.
So it kind of played like an aggressive infantry unit in some ways, because if you wanted to do damage out of the gate, it was decent at damage, and then could get the HE upgrade. And because it only had 2 range, that's kind of what it was forced to do. It couldn't really be. So in the video game, it was kind of a unit that you can you move forward with the army, and infantry can retreat to it. And then if you had the ambulance, kind of that aid truck, you could also reinforce there. That's kind of, I was actually a big US player, even though I wasn't good at them in COH2. You could really do that. So now that kind of the emergency vehicle is kind of built into their kit, even in first edition with the reinforce. But to really use that unit, you had 2 abilities. You had the airstrike, basically the airplane flying in, dropping a little HE damage on the board, and then also you had kind of a recon plane. So that's really what thematically we're going for here, is that the U.S. Major moving forward, both historically as well, the U.S. Major moving forward, kind of being at that base, kind of, keeping a little bit more hands-on, approach to the battlefield. And that's kind of what's represented here with the U.S. is that they have that upgrade there, kind of the XP upgrade. Now it's kind of a cool second thing, new thing in second edition rather, that allows infantry to spawn forward. So for 2 XP, you just put that die, and then infantry can spawn, instead of spawning in your spawn line, can spawn adjacent to that major. They have a single slow, so you can only spend 2 CP on it that first round. But that's kind of what that text is saying for those that can't read it. And it allows you to really get, so if you plan ahead at this major, you can kind of get that out. You can put it in a Jeep, move it across the board, and then use that as kind of a secondary forward base, if you will, to retreat to spawn next to if you get this upgrade. And then kind of like Slav already touched on, now this unit out of the gate kind of starts with that kind of air support, basically with the HE splash, 2 HE splash, and then also has that kind of recon plane conceptually, thematically built in with that munitions upgrade. So spots camo really is that general in the battlefield that when you're playing against the US, I really like to encourage the majors. So that's why they're at this cool level. And maybe if they're arguably a little bit too strong, you can only have one on the battlefield. So it's very unique for US in that we're able to kind of push the boundaries of how strong it is, especially for the cost. Like for a lot of other factions, if there wasn't that restriction of one, probably should be 4 manpower. But because of that restriction of having only
Mhm.
one, it really encourages this late game use, especially if you get to tier 3 early. So it kind of opens up a lot of US play styles where, hey, look, I'm kind of banking on saving up my manpower so I can get that US major out, push them forward, get infantry up there, save a lot of command points. So there's still, even though this is an easy faction, right?
Mhm.
This is one of the easiest factions in the game. There is a lot of depth and strategies and higher ceiling, especially in second edition, as you're seeing here, right with your core kit, completely before we even touch on the commanders. So a lot of cool, fun things. Like US is really, really fun to play. Arguably, I would say the most fun. I think people are going to find consistently in second edition. So even if you just get that 2-player core, you know, you're really, I think, going to love the major. That's kind of the goal. And even if you don't want to go heavy infantry, it just adds a lot of value. The spotting, the support HE damage now,
Mhm.
a lot of flexibility because even that 3 range out of the gate, that's kind of the fringe range where it's still arguably safe. It kind of does this in the video game a little bit where if you push it too close to the front, it's very frail. Only
Yep.
with the 3 health, it doesn't have a wrench, can't build defenses. But if you put it in a key building, it's kind of a very fun spot to put it in. So
Absolutely, man. I like that major. He pretty much, if you're any big games you're playing, we've played 3v3s, 4v4s, you will always see major out on the board, and they will always, just because that range. I mean, he's just such a very unique character. We always see the major on the board for the American players. Sherman, a kind of weird change. I mean, health stayed the same. Everything was the same except you swapped the anti-infantry damage for the upgrade for anti-tank damage, and you just pretty much did this backwards here. I've seen.
right, yeah. There's a little bit to unpack here. It looks a little bit quick to discuss, right? But there's actually a little bit more to unpack here, in that it's a little bit more. The goal is actually a little bit more thematically accurate. But even before we go there, let's touch on the first edition. I mean, we don't have to show them all, of course, but you're going to kind of see this trend as we're going through these, what I call, again, these, like we touched on with British, with the Cromwell, these medium class heavyweight tanks. We really wanted them to each have this distinctive feel.
Mm-hmm.
And the key thing was to not just throw, kind of in first edition, a lot of them you were just seeing speed die, speed die, speed die, speed die. A lot of them had that speed die option. And this is kind of US's focus, where they do have those lighter weight, fastest in class, fastest or close to fastest in class play style is kind of what we were looking for, but they're a little bit more frail, right? So
Mhm.
their health values, 4 is really, is really pushing that boundary where it's very easy in the board game. You're going to find, if you play a lot, the difference between 3 health and 4 health isn't that much. The difference between 4 and 5 for these heavy vehicles really is noticeable, and you wouldn't necessarily think that at first glance. But so yeah, now getting into it here, the thematically, what I was trying to go for in particular, this is kind of one that I spearheaded myself with the Sherman, is that it was originally designed to be that main battlefield tank, to be that main anti infantry kind of core support vehicle. So a lot of times, and then US's kind of motto was just slapping a 50 cal on basically on top of the turret on all the Pinto MG on a lot of their vehicles. That was kind of their thing that they really did. So really, to double down on that, kind of a subtle change you may not notice is that to represent that is that it's turreted, the AI damage. So
Yes,
the
I did
vehicle
see
is
that.
a lot more easy to use coming out of the gate. So the it doesn't have that tight little arc, especially with 2 range. It's very hard to use in first edition, and now being even narrower in second edition, it's even tougher to use. When you see that turretless arc and it's only a 2, it's very, very hard to
Yep.
use. So seeing that combination, we kind of found in playtesting, you're going to see as we kind of go through a lot of these tanks, if it is that turretless AI, usually those vehicles have 3 range
Mm-hmm.
as a balance, where these 2 ranged ones with the AI, to give them a little bit different feel, a little bit style, they can kind of drive past the infantry and use that turreted AI to still target that infantry.
Yep.
So kind of doubling down that theme, like I said, that 50 cal on top of the turret there. This really kind of thematically is what the Sherman was, and then also it was kind of when it came kind of mid to late war, it was kind of undergunned at that point of the war.
Mm-hmm.
So that 75 millimeter, basically turret on it, it was kind of undermatched a little bit, and they kind of typically used high explosive ammunition. So it didn't succeed that well against enemy armor, especially the heavy German armor at that point, in particular, like the Tigers. So this is just more thematically accurate,
Mhm.
where the munitions upgrade is representing kind of going back to the factory or later war, getting that 76, and that's kind of an unlock we actually I think already hit. I'm pretty sure we actually had early as a stretch reward
Mhm.
that we've already hit by this point. It's that 76 millimeter turret, where you can, if you want to, when you get this upgrade, if you want to visually represent that, kind of like the U.S. bazooka infantry that you get in the kit, you can, if you want to either doubly show it or just thematically show it, you can
Mhm.
kind of represent it by swapping out the infantry with the bazooka infantry. Same thing here with the Shermans. Now in second edition, you're going to be able to replace the default 75 millimeter turret with the 76 now in real life. So
Mhm.
that's kind of cool. It was used for that, and also the Sherman EZ8. If you actually get any of those commanders as we go through later, you'll be able to swap it out because the Sherman EZ8 also uses the 76. So that's kind of what it is. It's just trying to be a little bit more hysterically accurate, making those medium tanks play differently. It may not look that flashy looking at the comparisons here. They still have the speed die XP upgrade.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's kind of the touch there.
Nice. Yeah. And it's good. I mean, I think the changes were subtle enough, but in a good way, where it's not totally. It's like you said. That's what I really want to know. What was the thought process behind the decisions, and that you summed it up really well. Yeah. I mean, it's with the not being turreted, it definitely makes it more versatile. That turreted thing, it doesn't seem like much, but when you're playing the game and you have to spend a command point to turn your tank just to hit infantry units, yeah, I mean, it really does slow down a lot of things. In the first edition, when you only had 9 command points, I mean, it was like a drag. It really would drag a little bit on these decisions. Love it, love it, love it.
Yep.
Next thing is the M10 Wolverine. This one is pretty much really hasn't had much changes other than you did swap out the experience points for the munitions. You swapped out the speed dice with the anti armor piercing dice. Kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So, go ahead.
making it 3 also. Is this probably the most expensive experience point upgrade you can get?
Yeah, it is. It is at the tippy top. So there's a lot of things to unpack here with this Wolverine. What we are finding is, first and foremost, as you kind of go tier to tier board, one thing I didn't really touch on, and maybe I should have put a little bit more focus on, is that when you're looking at both the XP options and the munition options, you can kind of, if you want to scan a little bit to the left, to the other tier boards, perhaps, if you get a chance.
To the left, yeah,
But
absolutely.
you're going to kind of see, starting even in the, it's hard to see, for instance, on the tier 1 for US, because they have the rifleman with both options. But even though the splash isn't a damage upgrade, it kind of is in some ways. So that's kind of on the XP side. We really wanted to, tier by tier, going across all factions, really put some damage upgrades on the XP side, some on the munition side. So as you go to kind of tier 2, it's a little bit more clear here, because you can start to see in with the MG, that's got the XP upgrade as a speed die, but the flame is on the munition side, the AT guns on the XP side. So kind of sticking with that theme again. Obviously, you can see it for yourself. With tier 3, we were finding the Sherman now, especially since the Sherman has an AP upgrade, right? So we didn't want to have both the AP upgrades cost munitions. You know, we really wanted to give that flexibility of, hey, sometimes I want to go that Sherman because I can get that AP upgrade and have it kind of fulfill that role, that need for me to help threat basically enemy vehicles, where the Wolverine is XP. So you really need to have that experience, really upgrade that Wolverine. Thematically, it's kind of turning it a little bit towards a Hellcat. If you're, historically, think of it in terms of what historically the U.S. did, that Hellcat. So we don't have that obviously here, but thematically, that's kind of what it's representing,
Yeah.
right? It's trying to kind of pseudo represent that model as what the U.S. doctrine was, with the Shermans as their main battle tank, and they bring in the tank destroyers. For those that are history buffs,
Mm-hmm.
they probably know more than me, but just to kind of go into it as what the U.S. doctrine was at the time. So yeah, we were finding, just to touch on more now with why it's 3XP, the U.S. tank destroyer here, the Wolverine, was just, it's kind of first in class in a lot of ways. Yes, it's very frail at the 3 health, but because it has the starting speed die, can get the second speed die. We were finding that US was just, they are the easiest to play, but were they perhaps a little bit too easy to play and had too easy of a time just using these Wolverines to destroy enemy vehicles. And we found it just balancing these tank destroyers out, because US gets a lot of answers in their core kit. Having a tank destroyer in the core kit, not everyone has this.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like where that Cromwell is kind of pushed in that role with a very expensive chain of upgrades.
Yep.
Basically 3 per AP, 6 total to get the 2 to get to that 3 AP. So it's very expensive compared to the Wolverine, just balancing them out in the core kit, So that's
Yeah.
really why it's there.
Very nice. Very, very nice. And that is it. I mean, that is. And another thing is, the Wolverine is I think the British's Cromwell had the 2 speed dice, and the Wolverine, I think, is the only other with the 2 speed dice. Is that it? Because I don't think they need the Warmock or the OKW have a double 2 speed dice.
Out of the core units,
Yeah.
yes.
Very nice. So yeah, so that's one thing we realized. The Ally faction seems to be much more mobile than the German, but that's a whole other story in time of itself. Just want to show you what the models will look like. This TTS models, they are not bad, but the actual models are way better quality. So you can see the Sherman here, the M10, the Wolverine. This is more from the Elite Commander Doctrines. This is the oh man, why can't I think of the name?
That's the Pershing.
The Pershing, thank you. Was that? That's not the Calliope. Yeah, it's Calliope.
That is, yeah.
Yep. This is the T-70s, the Soviets.
That's
Stuart.
Yep, you got it. You're getting
Stuart.
there.
This is the howitzer. No, it's not the B4 bomber, is it?
That's the priest.
The priest. There we go. And then
Nickname for
this is, I think this is going to be in the Lost Brigades, right? Correct?
You're right. Yeah, that's the new bulldozer. Yep, that's 6. Yeah, it looks like it accidentally is showing 5 there on the screen, but it is 6 health with a defense die. It's kind of the U.S. didn't really have it. They historically in the war, they didn't really have those heavy tanks. Late, they had a little bit of that Pershing, which was still kind of in between that medium and heavy class. And we were trying to, kind of balance wise, give the U.S. some little option. These kind of niche vehicles, kind of filling in roles. The bulldozer helped, obviously,
Yep.
with clearing things out, historically, but it kind of gives them that heavier tank option in terms of play.
Awesome sauce.
As
Yeah.
we'll see that more when we get to it in the commander.
Yeah. Now we are going to we're going to briefly go over the commanders because we don't want to drag you guys out for too long. Here's all the commanders we have here. Let's get the American Infantry Doctrine 1. We'll go from just like last time, from left to right. And if I have the first edition ones, I'll put them up while we go through it. So let me find them real quick so you guys can see the change in the commanders. All right. So first one is the Tactical Support Doctrine. Tactical support. This is alphabetic here. Here we go. Boom. And let's get a real nice, good shot of this. Hopefully that's it. Oh, it's too close. Let me zoom out a little tiny bit. Hopefully, there we go. A little better. So Tactical Support Doctrine in the first edition. MG bunkers, you still have them in there. And actually, you have the price for them was reduced by 2 munitions from the first edition. Stuart Call-in has been completely removed.
Completely added.
I mean, completely added, yeah. Removed from the first edition. Not removed, I'm sorry. Added to the second edition. Not even existing in the first edition. The P-47 strafing support, which, again, I love call-ins, was swapped out with the paradrop equipment, but you still do get the Calliope. And the only change being the Calliope in the first edition had splash, and in the second edition it has splash, but it has one less HE damage. It actually reduced the damage by 1.
Yeah, we can get into that here, but let's just start in order here. So the thing to note with this commander, it is in ECC. It's just a kind of note for those watching. The Stewart is, the Stewart and the I call it the Calliope. I'm not sure which is correct. So if I'm incorrect, cool, let me know. But it is in that expansion. So we wanted to, especially where we could, find a few more of these commanders. A lot of these factions have 4 basically commanders, except for the Wehrmacht and OKW. The rest have 4 commanders for that expansion.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to kind of emphasize those vehicles as much as possible, right? So the Stewart wasn't on. I tried to at least get 2 different commanders with those. So the Stewart I think was only on 1. So this is where we wanted to add it, and it was to replace a kind of a duplicate ability. We wanted to try to reduce those number of duplicates for those special abilities on commanders. For instance, that Ranger
Yeah.
endurance training was on 2 or 3 different commanders in first edition. So we wanted to try to find ways that we can kind of, hey, I'm getting ECC. I want to use these new vehicles. Let's see these new vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So the tactical support, yeah, just so you guys watching, if you don't, now what we're going to have is even the 2D tokens in second edition and in the update kit, the 2D tokens for emplacements aren't going to have any stats on them. So they're
Mhm.
going to be available for every faction to use. And then also if you have those British emplacements, which we're going to try to add even to the update kit with a stretch reward if we can get there, you can use those British emplacements, put a little MG in it, and that could be the MG bunker for US. And it does kind of actually play similarly to first edition. It does have that 2 range, but because it's so inexpensive, that's the way we kind of balanced it. Is it really gives US a different, more aggressive play style coming in at the end of round 1 because you have the
Mhm.
1 experience, which you again get for free. Those who aren't familiar with the XP system, you do get 1 for free. So anytime you see a commander with that 1 XP cost, you can get that at the end of round 1. So you can kind of push a rifleman forward, drop an MG bunker on a key area of the map, and then as US, if you want, then skip going MGs that game.
Mhm.
So this commander offers that different play style right out of the gate. And then with the Stewart's now has kind of, we touched on very recently ago with the Wolverine. This is kind of that quick support vehicle for US. 2 speed dice right out of the gate for heavy. It's basically a low health heavy that can support you anywhere on the board.
Mhm.
It's kind of great so that if you have a lot of units on the board, the double speed dice really help with the CP crunch, the command point crunch of those lower, rounds. You can still move these easily around, face them using their frontal arc towards enemy, basically armor piercing damage very easily at these Stewarts. It helps support, soften up targets, get the damage past like those cover defenses, past those building defense dice
Mhm.
to help kind of put that pressure on the map in critical spots. And then as you touched on with the P47, this one is basically HE damage. So they're very similar. You're going to see some throughout the factions. This is kind of that P47 strafing support with that HE damage. And as you noted by quick looking at the Calliope or Calliope, that it does look on paper that it was kind of brought in. It looks like a nerf at first glance. It's just a little bit different role. So now with again that splash change, it's 2 HE splash.
Mhm.
So it does have that big battlefield impact with being a highly mobile because it's a heavy vehicle.
Yeah.
It is turreted. It
Yep.
does. The new symbol is that indirect, kind of that big arrow that you see. It's indirect, like mortars. All mortars have that
Mhm.
now. In first edition, all HE was indirect, but we tried to add a little quick symbol for thematic accuracy where we could, where it can kind of shoot over buildings. So it really is that kind of mobile. If you want to focus on just maybe get a major and a Calliope is kind of what we see commonly used as kind of threatening those clumps of units. US really excels at that, especially with these commanders kind of comboing those two where you don't necessarily need the US mortar. So yeah, with 4 health, it has some good sustainability too, where even if it gets caught, even though with the 4 range, it can, be support, but if it
Yeah.
needs to be in the front line a little bit, it can usually take a hit, especially if you could face the frontal arc right to kind of get those defense dice.
Yeah, and I like this commander. I really enjoy this commander, especially second edition. Just a couple things. One small thing is the Stewart from the first edition to second edition. It actually lost 1 anti-infantry damage, it got removed, but in exchange, it got a second speed dice. So it's more mobile, but it's less danger against infantry, and it is reduced by 1 fuel. It used to be 3-3, now it's 3-2, which is very nice. All right, next is the mortar pool guys. Let's get these guys up here. First edition, this was a go-to. Everybody really liked this one because it was so powerful. In the second edition, it was completely changed around. And now in the mortar pool, before you could just pretty much you unlock it, and then when you unlock one of those, you can get one of those for free when you unlock it. Here, right off the bat, 3 XP. It's almost a totally different commander. You can for 5 munitions spawn 2 jeeps, not including the one you get for free to spawn. So very mobile start for this faction. Calliope is in here just like in the first edition. The Pershing's in here like in the first edition. Some changes to the Pershing is none, other than its fuel was reduced by 1 in the cost.
Yeah, the manpower. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry,
fuel.
the fuel. Right. I
Yep.
was looking at the wrong one. Sorry, you're right. The fuel. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the new standardization of those heavy vehicles. There was just a lot of tuning there. We wanted them. A lot of them had the one for free, right? But we wanted to also make them a little bit more purchasable with your actual resources. Where we were finding people would just grab one on commanders that offered you one for free. They would grab one, but then really not have that fuel. They're a bit too expensive to purchase on a consistent basis, right? So what's the point of even showing the cost if
Right.
you could never actually buy one? It's almost like in first edition, why even be there? So that's kind of where we kind of tried to find that right line of balance versus cost of how to be able to try to get them out there on the battlefield when you're actually paying for them.
And what's nice about this one, actually, when you get to tier 4, which is 5 experience points, you do get 1 Pershing for free. So you get a Jeep and a Pershing here. And Brian did note earlier in the British expansion, all commander cards will actually provide 2 free spawns. Here, it's a Jeep and a Pershing.
Yeah, so this one here again this is kind of the first note of it, as Slava mentioned. That was actually a big change of that commander, kind of like we touched on with the British, where these are in the first edition, the motor pool here was kind of the British one, similar one, where it had it was really hard to balance, especially because it just had this different system where it gave you 1 call in for free later on. It was just, as we touched on in that video, it's just hard to balance. So in second edition here, it plays a lot different now. So you have like you said, the Jeeps. That's kind of the new theme. Use your munitions that way to get a lot of vehicles on the board. And then now you kind of see they're not spawns for free. So you get that choice as you're unlocking both tier 2 and tier 3. You can choose, hey, do I want the Calliope this game, or do I want the Pershing this game? And you have to pay for them. So again, leaning into what I just said, that cost reduction, and then you do get a Pershing for free. So typically that's how you play this one. If you want to get that first Pershing, you pay for it, and then the second one, in this case, you get for free with that cool outmaneuver ability where you get to move all of your vehicles. So this is just a very heavy, heavily leaning into both light and heavy vehicles with the Jeeps. That's kind of the theme of this commander. So you got to go those Jeeps early to hold out to give you time to get those heavier vehicles.
Yeah, love the changes. I mean, it's a totally different commander, and in such a positive way. Heavy Cavalry Company. Let me find the OG, the original. And just to be sure, this one is from the Elite Commander Doctrine also. Boop, 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 boom, boom.
Yep, it's got the Pershing, so.
Yep. So, Heavy Cavalry Riflemen, this is such an amazing upgrade. Defense Doctrines, they get 1 additional defense dice on benefit from some sandbags. Super strong. This was used often. Next is you can spend at start of newer phase, spend your very first 2 CP and 2 munitions for all your units that are adjacent to one another. They gain 1 sight and 1 range this round. That is so powerful. It's insane. I mean, it's such a powerful. That pretty much means that everything gets all your infantry, or your riflemen get +1 range and sight, which now makes them incredibly stronger. And all your tanks get increased sight and range. It's very, very, very strong. But you do have to spend the 2 munitions and the 2 CP. So it is costly. And you need to keep them all together. Wolverines and Shermans cost 1 less manpower. That was an original, and the Pershing here is also added in. So the only real big change was was just here needing it's specifying exactly when to spend that CP at the beginning of the round, because in the original edition it didn't really tell you when. So a lot of questions was, when is this commander's ability used? Do I use it before mover phase, after mover phase, before damage phase, during damage phase? So that's very nice that it clears that up there.
Yep. I mean, just to touch on that quickly. Yeah, there was a slight change with the requisition officer. It went from fuel in first edition to second. So now we are finding the manpower was more of the crunch in general, the harder resource to basically collect and use, where the fuel's that timer to unlocking the vehicles. So this helps soften that choice of, hey, look, obviously I can get a Pershing. Why would I still get a Sherman? Or why would I still get a Wolverine, right? Because the Pershing kind of statistically is just better in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. So it kind of gives you that choice a little bit tough, makes that tough choice a little bit tougher, where, hey, now I get the Shermans and Wolverines for cheaper, so maybe I do want to still mix, not just always just save up for Pershings, and kind of just gives you that option and gives you infantry for free. Again, that's that new standard of 2 different tiers having spawns for
Mhm.
free. And the combined arms, yeah. So it's a little bit more to signal, like you said, hey, when am I doing it? I'm going to do it this round. So the US kind of has that option now of, to kind of make up for that weakness of them having a little bit more trouble capturing points, where now they can kind of do that standoff mode a little bit better, where they don't really commit someone to come in and sight and come in and be the front line like those riflemen. If it's just going to get destroyed, now they have that option of, hey, I'm just going to outrange you, so now you have to come to me. Or like if there's a defensive
Right.
position, kind of be able to threaten that without heavily committing something. So it gives them that little different play style, because they do have that rifleman with the sandbags, but you combine that, you can really have kind of a front line that's very fortified. So it just really gives that commander a very interesting play style of just that heavy, fortified position.
Yep.
I'm gonna force you to come to me, kind of thing.
Super nice. I really like this commander. Actually, I like almost all the commanders in the game. That's why you'll always hear me say that I really like it. Next is the Cavalry Rifle Company, and this is part of the. Ooh, this is a new one.
Yeah, that's the Lost Brigades. At the time, your working title was Assault. So kind of they're that assault geared commander. So that's kind of the focus, as you see in a lot of these. So this one in particular, you're gonna first stand out. We can kind of start with the second one because of that, because I was noting that cavalry rifleman. It's US's unique, right? Kind of, I know it's called rifleman, right? That's kind of just matching what it was called in the video game, but it's really their frontal assault rifleman getting that 2 close range firepower, that 5 health defense die. It is US's. They don't have it in their kit, their core kit out of the box. The core faction. This is kind of their best one at capturing points, especially mid to late game, where you need something that's going to probably survive to be able to get that capture. So this is kind of US's core cool option to fulfill that weakness that they have over the core kit.
Mhm.
Comboing back to their first step on it ability there, when you first get the commander, this lets your vehicles move that 1 extra. So it kind of gives like their Jeep, for instance, you step on it, then spend the speed die, and then 3 cubes. So you can kind of get that 5 range with your Jeep, which is just very mobile. You can also use that late game on your late game tanks here, because this actually gets access to the Sherman Easy 8. This is kind of the second commander, first one that we see here, but second overall that gets access to the Sherman Easy 8. It does use that 76 turret, right? So you can kind of use that to represent that this is the Sherman Easy 8. And yeah, this one you have to purchase. So you don't get one for free. But it is kind of that nice cost where it's 1 more manpower than the Sherman. But you kind of see like an eye-opening 3 range, 3 AP damage.
Yep.
This is arguably US's best option into infantry. Still has the 2 AP. This is kind of like late war. This is what US was looking to go for, as they had these, late World War II and then early Korean War. So this was kind of their cool little focus that they were pushing the Sherman to be the maximum, that kind of pushing the capacity of what that Sherman tank was able to pull off. And this is kind of just shows it, right? So that's kind of where you kind of see this with the Sherman Easy 8. You see it with the T-34-85 later on when we get to the Soviets, that we really wanted to push the boundaries with what we could offer damage-wise and for cost, bang for the buck. But, even if you see the stat block and say, wow, that's amazing, at 4 health, it is very easy to still destroy. So again, that 4 or 5 health, 4, 5, 6 health, you can kind of you'll feel it once you actually see this in action that 4 is still easy. If you just get the damage on it, you can knock these right out. So they had the firepower, they had the range, don't have the sight, so they need a spotter.
Yep.
But can really kind of be almost like a command vehicle on the battlefield if you centrally locate them. Can really help spread the damage around with both damage types being turreted.
Yeah, and now for that Sherman 105 bulldozer, just to be sure, for the AI damage there, it says it's not turreted. Is it supposed to be turreted? Is that
No, that one was a little bit oddity because we wanted to balance it, right? Because looking at these numbers, it does have 2 range. This is, again, kind of breaks that standard that I touched on before. So it is only 2 range and 2 AI, and is turretless out of the front. So this one is kind of, because it's a huge stat block we're looking at. We're looking at the 6 health, we're looking at the defense die, we're looking at the 3 HE, which is the turreted with basically the 105 millimeter howitzer. So we're looking at essentially trying to keep these in line, all these vehicle options. A lot of people say, hey, look, these heavier vehicles should be just flat out stronger, right? But, we kind of want to keep the game balanced where when you have these options, you don't just always go these heavy vehicles every game just because you have it. So we want to keep these in line, at least some degree, right? They are stronger. 6 HP is, like I said, that threshold where it is very hard to get the damage on it to destroy it in the game. So you can be a little bit more reckless with these 6 HP vehicles. So for balance reasons, we tried to keep these numbers in other places more in line. Only 2 range. So you really encourages to push these vehicles up to the front, right? Because obviously the 3 range, you can't kind of use that thing like the Sherman Easy 8 can where it has a spotter, right? Dozer's really just going to spot for itself. It's going to be that frontline unit to kind of charge in. It kind of helps play the unit too as you're learning the game. Hey, I have the health bar. Why don't I just charge in? So that's kind of really its role to kind of go to the front line. And this is the first one where we start to see, we kind of saw with the British Valentine, but here assaulting destroys the battlefield defenses. So if an enemy infantry basically built sandbags, it could come in, assault the hex, and that's not too common for heavy vehicles to assault, even because they can't capture points. But it may be because it destroys the sandbags before defense dice are rolled. So it can kind of be a critical spot where the enemy they're kind of relying on their sandbags.
Yeah.
And you can just be like, nope, I'm coming in with the bulldozer. I'm clearing that right out. We're going to, really wipe that infantry, where you're going to really force enemy infantry in a bad spot, because this can hit it with the AI. As the 3 HE dies, it's just really strong, gets enemy basically fortifications and placements and infantry, because with that 3 HE and AI combination.
Very nice. Yeah. Okay. Next, Ranger Company. Boom. Endurance training riflemen can spend 4 CP per round, and their munition upgrades cost 1 less, which is in the original one, they just spend 4 CP. Very nice there. And their munitions cost 1 less, so that means that you are making that upgrade half the price from the first edition, from 4 to 3 to 2 with this commander. Super nice. Super nice. Anything with mobility, I really enjoy. That's what's Doctrine's nice. Defensive stance, in the first one, I think it was called Hit the Dirt, but Rifleman spend 1 speed, drop to the ground, gaining heavy cover this round, even if assaulted. That's crazy, even if assaulted. This unit cannot spend CP, move or retreat this round. So pretty much once he spends it, he's locked in. Kind of the same from the first one. Actually, really similar to the same to the first one.
Right.
Priest Colin? I'm sorry.
It's just a wording clarification there, just to help people with the questions. We're getting a lot of questions with that. Just to clarify that you're locked in. You can't spend any more CP this round. Go ahead, sorry.
And you can't retreat, which is crazy. Just like when you assault, you can't retreat. The Priest, he's in here. Really no changes other than reduction in manpower, but increase in fuel to get him out. In the first edition, this guy would come out all the time, and this would be pretty much spawned instantly. I mean, in the first edition, here you also need it's the little things that really make big changes. You need tier 3 building to get the Priest out. First of all, they did add a symbol to remind you can shoot over buildings with this. This one spawns for free, but they did increase the fuel by 1, reduce the manpower by 1, which I think is pretty fair. I mean, the Priest, you don't realize it, but when you have 4 range with 2 HE, it's really nice. That's pretty mobile. That you don't have to set up, put back down. Very nice there. And West Point reserves. Major gains his XP ammunition upgrade for free. Whenever you don't have a major in play, one spawn's free during the purchase phase. Super, super interesting. It's the same one pretty much from the first edition. So not too much real big changes. It's just updates and clarifications and a little more better wording for when effects take place. The Ranger Company is very popular in big games. Very, very popular in big games because people like the priest, people like the mobility, and getting a free major from round to round is great. Because if you notice, one thing I realized when you play as Americans, if you have a major out, they will always try to kill the major. The major is like very strong. Always trying to kill off the major because he provides so much benefits. The camo and everything. Great commander here. Like
yeah,
that.
not too many. Yep, not too many changes, like you said. You kind of went over it. You touched on it really well. This one obviously is one of the rifleman focused ones, right? With the 2 tiers that have, pertaining to riflemen in particular. Like you said, even if assaulted, you kind of touched on everything. I really don't have too much to add there. The priest cost did change, so again, it's kind of the new trend with HE damage as we're going to start to see. We didn't really see too much with British, but as you're going to start to see, especially with other factions that have more HE vehicles, where the fuel is kind of the more of the focus on the high explosive vehicles, and we reduce the manpower to try to balance out those options to give variety. If I have a lot of manpower, I can go this type of unit. If I have a lot of fuel, I can go the HE vehicles. And yeah, I mean, it looks like the wording changed a lot. It's really just clarifications for the major, that tier 4. It didn't really change. It kind of had the exact text. It just clarifies that if you lose your major, you get another one for free with those upgrades. Really just kind of clarifies it. No real change there. So
Very
this one is
nice.
probably one of the ones that changed the least overall.
Mm-hmm.
It was just really just balancing overall. The XP costs were a lot lower in first edition. So it's just a little bit too easy to get out. So that was pretty much it with that commander. We just kind of balanced it compared to the new standard for second edition.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to Armor Company. Armor Company. Okay, Rifleman can spawn assault engineers. They had assault engineers too, but I think that our assault engineers have completely been changed. In the first one, they had flame damage and 1 repair. Here they have close quarter damage, 2 wrenches. But what's interesting is you can technically upgrade them with the rifleman upgrade. So you can actually give them an armor piercing or anti-infantry upgrade as a normal rifleman upgrade, which is very nice. Vehicles can spend 2 CP, spend 2 munitions to deploy smoke on their hex at the beginning of damage phase. That's in here. They did increase the cost by 1. I think 1, cost of it being 1, it does get used a lot. And this is one way for vehicles pretty much to dodge, to pretty much beat up people adjacent to them and avoid all the damage. And I think increasing by 1 really does help out, where it's like, do you really want to spend 2 munitions on this? Next is Armor Tacticians. Picture was changed. Heavy vehicles. Infantry gain 2 defense dice when adjacent to heavy vehicles, including during assault if the assaulted hex is adjacent. Does not apply in buildings or stack of other cover. Where in the first one, it was just heavy vehicles may pay 1 munition to deploy smoke on their hex. Pretty much, this actually, Armor Technician was the rewording of smoke defense. That's what they did there. They switched the wording out. So
yeah,
Armor
you're right.
Technician,
The smoke ability moved from tier 3 to tier 2, and elite vehicle cruise was dropped. And then this is the new armor tactician ability. It kind of encourages that combined arms for your infantry, like that one with the British commander. It's kind of a, the US's version where they just follow their heavy vehicles. Typically really designed to use the Sherman, and now you'll see the Sherman EZ8 in tier 4 to really keep your riflemen, maybe spotting for the Sherman EZ8 because they have the 2 sight, right? So you can kind of have the riflemen out in front, build sandbags or something, or charge into a building and assault in a building with basically the riflemen that are assault engineers. So they have 2 close range firepower, no AI out of the gate. So you can kind of use that, lean into the armor tactician to really charge into buildings and stuff, really excel in that role, and then the Sherman EZ8 to help put that damage output out.
yeah. Next, Mechanized Company. Let me get that out. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, she's getting that one out. Yeah, this one is another one that didn't change too much from first edition. It's very similar. This is kind of the inspiration for the Jeep getting that AI upgrade with the 50 cal on their base, kind of the core option now in second edition. But so in addition to being able to pay to get it, Now they have it by default, right? That 3 munitions for an AI. Again, that's the inspiration for it. But now, first upgrade, 1 XP. Can you upgrade the? Yes. Now, yeah, that was actually a question in first edition where it was kind of weird in the FAQ. But now, whenever you see a unit like a rifleman spawns as this, whenever you see that standard wording, it does have access to those upgrades. So when vehicles say it just uses a chassis, that's really just as a reference to the vehicle as to what chassis the turret's going to go to.
Mhm.
But with that, the assault engineers, they are riflemen. They may spawn as assault engineers, so you do get the 2 close range firepower, and as we touched on already with the riflemen, they can get 2 AI upgrades. So this could be insane high damage output against infantry. For if
Mhm.
you're looking to assault, you can get 4 AI on this guy. That's insane. You're just going to wipe
Crazy.
out enemy infantry just by himself.
And
Just
2
by
repairs.
himself.
Yeah.
Yep.
Boom, boom.
All right, so coming back to this mechanized, yeah, like you said, so this brings the AI down from 3 munitions to 2. So this is kind of the vehicle focus, right? Mechanized company. This really focuses on, hey, I want to get that Jeep firepower with the 50 cal. Use those a little bit more aggressively for 1 XP, so you can get this right going into that second round. Buy a
Mhm.
Jeep, give an AI upgrade for 2 munitions. Greyhound kind of becomes it's focused like an early to mid game commander, focusing on getting those Greyhounds, right? Getting them out with their defense die so they have sustainability. And then next you get the defensive smoke. This is another US. There's not, there's a few that do have smoke, but not too many. And this is the other one that has smoke. So kind of works with both the Jeeps. Again, Jeeps can capture, so you go drive that Jeep at a capture point, smoke it, capture it. Very cheeky play, if you want to look for that aggression.
Mhm.
And then they get the Wolverines also. So the Wolverines can use the smoke as well. All vehicles can use it. So now these Wolverines come with that 3 XP extra AP die out of the gate. All of them gain it. So even if you already made it, gains it. New ones gain it. Just gives you that firepower, gives you that armor piercing. You got the basically the Jeeps and the Greyhounds for your anti-infantry. You get the Wolverines late game. Just a little bit more tighter. So we moved that Sherman Easy 8, like we swapped it to that other commander we already just touched on there. So now this one gets the Wolverine. So you get that combination where, hey, it's a little bit easier to play right. So you get the Jeep for the AI and the Wolverines for the AP.
Yes, very, very nice. Airborne Company, let me load these boys up. Let me find the first edition ones quickly. Get these
Yep, so I
guys
can
up.
start touching on that one. The Airborne Company, a lot of it is a balancing act. Oh boy, Rudy's commenting there. Awesome that he joined us. So the Airborne Company here, the paratroopers, this one's just a very popular commander. It actually really was, first edition was just a little bit harder to use in a lot of different ways. So the paratroopers out of the gate now, basically a great cost, a little bit of a discount compared to the default riflemen, which are 4 manpower. First edition, as you see, 4 manpower and 4 munitions, double slow, 2 XP. It just wasn't really getting used. Fast capture is just removed from the game basically now. Essentially, we have neutralize built in right on everyone. So this was kind of just a balancing thing where fast capture, we weren't seeing too much of it, but it was one of those things that could easily be abused. So we felt was unfun where the enemy couldn't respond because you could do it during the maneuver phase. So this one's just trying to be a lot more interesting. It is very
Right.
versatile now. The key thing to note is that to spawn the paratroopers and the paradrop the equipment, the weapon teams, you need vision. So that's the key balancing thing now in second edition. So if you have a unit, vision is 2 typically, so you can spawn a little bit more out in front. You just can't spawn anywhere on the board where the enemy doesn't have a chance to respond. Not too many other changes other than that. Obviously, the rocket strike is slightly different. We standardized it and clarified when it's used, and then you just get a second paratrooper for free. So it's a nice little bonus there.
Yeah. Urban Assault. This is actually a new one. I have nothing to say about this. This is 100% you here filling this one in. This is totally new.
Yeah, this is kind of focusing in a little bit on now. Their first step is that riflemen can use smoke when assaulting. So essentially, they get a little bit aggression there. So you can, that's kind of, again, covering the US weakness in a little bit different way than the cavalry riflemen. So you can charge onto a hex that you want to capture, throw down the smoke. Hopefully the enemy can't get enough damage to wipe out your squad. Yeah, so consecutive hexes, that is a question that is in the FAQ for the commanders, each and every one that has that, but that's exactly right. It is consecutive hexes is in a straight line. That is a great question you have there. The howitzer barrage is a little bit different here. It's basically just that little, kind of like, picturing these priests off map trying to give you a little bit support. It's just a little specific focus. I know Slava loves these abilities. And then you see the new Jackson that we actually unlocked for the Lost Brigades expansion. This turret just goes on the Wolverine chassis and just basically throws out a lot of damage there at long range, turreted, speed die. It does not get the Wolverine upgrades, but I don't really feel like it needs any of them because out of the gate it is pretty expensive. Does have low HP, so you do want to keep this guy alive. You kind of want something to spot for him. But then look at that. You do get the dozer with this commander. So there you go. If you want that spotter, you got it. Right
Yeah.
there. Dozer can charge right in. So, I mean, this one's a little bit easy to play. You get the aggressive infantry early on, can get some support howitzer. And then looking in the late game, you do have to buy those Jacksons. But you save up. You can still get a Wolverine if you're right, if you need to, because Wolverines are really, really cheap at 2 manpower and 3 fuel. Where if you really need that extra damage and the extra range, that Jackson just really, with that bigger, the 90 millimeter turret, just can really throw out those damage across the map, long range.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. All right. And the guy that played this, Rudy, is actually in chat, so he can fill us in as he needs to. Pathfinder Company. Let me get these bad boys out. This is also from the early bird
This is-
Pathfinders, but
Yeah, it was early bird for the first edition campaign. That was kind of the early bird reward as we gave out. So this one basically went through a big balance change, and it was really trying to lean a little bit more into how they're played in the video game. This was kind of one of the fun ones in the video game, where you could create these little beacons on the map, and they were spawned. They could basically then signal for your airdrop, your heavy paratroopers to drop in, right? So that's just kind of how that commander was used in the video game. So we leaned in a little bit more in that concept where these Pathfinder squads, they're almost like mini snipers, right? They have 3 health, but they only have 1 AI, so they're not really great at damaging, not too great at capturing points either because they don't have a lot of health. But at 3 manpower, they're kind of a nice cheap alternative to kind of get up there and get on the board very very early on. So at the end of round 1, you can unlock this for 1 XP. And as we hear the little guy here, the little guy's probably explaining it better than I am. So then we get that, like I touched on, that airdrop beacon. So it lets infantry spawn adjacent. Just any other non-Pathfinder unit. So you kind of use that Pathfinder as kind of the beacon to kind of keep spawning infantry forward. You can also spawn weapon teams. It's kind of just that versatile option you have there. And one spawns for free, so you can get a second one. Okay, good. I did lose access on Discord to your screen share though. I don't know. Just as whatever you clicked. Not a problem. Awesome. There we go. So yeah, ending up with the airdrop combat. I don't see the old version of it, but I kind of remember it in my head generally. That was just a little bit more balanced, a little bit different. We tried to find the right cost for it, and the mortars was tried to, just really focuses on the new mortar style, and they can now get that extra HE. So if you really want them to be like that Soviet mortar, it is a little bit stronger, can throw out the damage and the splash. So it just puts it in a really cool spot for this commander where they have a tough spot, because you have all these options of spawning the weapon teams forward. You can kind of do interesting things with this commander where you have a Pathfinder go out wide, perhaps, to like the outskirts of the battle, get some mortar spawn adjacent to them to kind of reach the opponent's back line on a spot where they don't have units to kind of, go threaten those mortars. So it gives you these kind of cool, different, very different play style than a lot of the other ones because you can just spawn them directly there with the Pathfinder to spot, the Pathfinder to help spot for those weapon teams because he does have that 3 range in sight the spot for the weapon teams like the mortars and the AT guns. And then with that airdrop command, boom, you could just get them all for a good package deal, basically.
For sure. I have the little guy here between my feet. He is joining in hardcore. So Pathfinders, one thing I did really like was the fact that from the first edition, it used to be 9 munitions to bring him out, and that's when you couldn't store more than 10 of any single resource, and that's where my big gripe was before. Now they actually reduced it to 6, but it does cost 3 manpower to do the airdrop combat group, which I don't think I've actually ever seen anybody actually use it. But yeah, so in that case, light cavalry. This is the one I think Rudy had one of these to use during his game.
Yeah, he opted for a different one. Yeah, I don't see your little overlay to compare, but again, I kind of remember for this commander from first edition that this one didn't change too much. It's more reliant really on that Stewart change, and the big change here is actually that the Stewart you don't get one for free. So, oh yeah, I can see it on the stream. I just can't see it. That's fine.
Okay.
So it's just really maybe on my end, which is fine. And then so the Stewart, yeah, did have one for free, and instead now what allows you to do you might be disappointed to see that it doesn't spawn one for free, but instead what it does give the option for is to purchase them earlier. So kind of going in to the third round, you can go ahead and purchase them then. Because you get your basically the light cavalry training, the light infantry training for your riflemen at the end of the first round, and the second round, you can now purchase a Stewart, pretty much guaranteed, right? Because you're going to get that one XP for free, so you can rely on that. So you can unlock tier 2, kind of save your resources at the end of round 1, your manpower and fuel, and then just unlock tier 2 and maybe buy 2 Stewarts. There's a lot of flexibility with this commander, because then as you see, going with the strategic maneuvers, this kind of just is a little bit easier to use. I think it's very close, I think, to the first edition, but it kind of standardized it. This is used now as like the T70 is in second edition. You spend a CP to toggle on capture or firing now. So it's very clear. You just, kind of like a weapon team. In no fire mode, you just use that same die side to show that it's not going to fire. But instead, normally only the tier 1 light vehicles can capture. But now this Stewart has red health, immune to full all anti-infantry damage, and has the frontal armor if you're facing towards armor piercing damage. And with the 2 speed dice, this is kind of another reason why the Stewart was changed to have 2 speed dice. To really excel in this other role and kind of distinguish it, especially on this commander, to really specialize in capturing points and just giving US a completely different play style. To have these Stewarts buzzing around on the map, capturing key spots, immune to MGs from the enemy if they're playing against a Wehrmacht player, because they can still capture. And then the Browning 5250 cal on the turret that you have on the top of the model, that's kind of what basically the Stewarts really shined at. So yeah, we did remove that AI out of the base Stewart, but now what it does is it comes back here and gives you that 3 range. So now they can kind of stay alive late game, even though they only have the 2 HP, kind of doing that same thing that we had with the light tier 2 vehicles, where they can kind of skirt that range at 3 range, help support the 2 AI damage and 1 AP damage to stay alive. They're not that frontal. Early, when you first get them early game, there's not much with armor piercing damage, but late game helps with their survivability. Yeah, there's that you won't be able to take advantage of that if you're trying to capture a point, obviously with no fire anyway. But it kind of gives you that tough choice now. Do I want to use them to capture, or do I want to help that, especially with that AI role to help put pressure against enemy infantry, maybe capturing one of my points, thinking of that going into that late game. Certainly. Oh yeah, I didn't even remember that part. Yeah, now seeing that card. Yeah, again, that kind of near standardization of the basically speed die cost, especially for infantry. We found that it was really hard to use the light cavalry for, that run and gun style that you want to be able to do. So now in second edition, you can get both. A lot of times you have more munitions to be able to get both the AI upgrade or AP upgrade on those riflemen, and also grabbing the speed die. Oh, it looks like the stream might not be able to hear you right now. I don't know. Oh, that's okay. Awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, I know. He's got the little one in the background, so it's mostly me talking anyway. So moving on to Devil's Brigade. Oh, there's the little one.
There you guys go. Yeah, I'm a little muted because the little guy here is he's, having a little fun time. See, the one thing me and Brian want to do, we do want to go over each one in depth, but this little guy here, you know, if when he gets up, he gets up. So, but yeah, let's go to the Devil's Brigade and go through that. Boom.
Oh, they also said my camera's frozen on the stream.
Interesting.
The stream looks fine for me right now.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
Maybe a little bit earlier. But thanks, Rudy.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that. All the feedback in there.
Yeah, the Devil's Brigade. I know we see the little one right now, but this actually commander changed quite a bit from first edition. The Devil's Brigade was a very cool. Thanks, Rudy, for the clarification. That's good now. Yeah, so the Devil's Brigade changed quite a bit, where it was kind of this overly focused, unique unit with a whole commander built around this Devil Brigade. This interesting, infantry unit for the U.S. Kind of just really, focused on this hyper focus against buildings and the specific role. Where now in second edition, kind of gives them a little bit different role. So now when they spawn, they have one extra health over other riflemen, so they're a little bit more durable. So that's kind of their focus. Again, making up for that U.S. core weakness that they just don't have. That going up to that 5 health when normally they don't have that option. U.S. as a kit, giving them ambush, what gives them that camo and close range firepower, all as a bang package at 4 munitions. So yeah, you could pay 3 for an AI. You still can. You can stack them. So now you can get up to 3 AI and the close range firepower and camo, 5 health. These guys are just monsters on the battlefield if you invest in them. Really fun unit. Gets demolition in the next tier. So this is kind of a cool. It helps clarify in the FAQ, but I'll go over it here. Now at the end of the round, essentially at the very end of the damage phase, as it states on the card, you can decide if you want to try to basically use high explosives on that building. So essentially, it gives you the option to, let's say you assault the building. You're duking out with the enemies. You're kind of placing these explosives, and then if you fail your assault, you retreat 1. You still get the option to try to blow up the building. So it kind of gives you that flexibility where, yeah, you still got to fight them out. Or instead, if you want to assault, instead you just build sandbags, and then because you're adjacent to it, at the end of the round, you can signal to do the explosives. So like if you don't want to go ahead and assault the building, gives you that other option. And now just to kind of round out the commander a little bit more and give you some more options rather than focusing too much on the Devil's Brigade. Now they get that Sherman 76 out of the gate. So now you can just switch all of them to that new turret that we unlocked. So out of the gate, they get that AP damage. So they have the 2 AP and 1 AI. Out of the gate, you don't have to spend any more XP or munitions on them. So it just kind of rounds out the commander a little bit more, gives them a little bit of focus of both the Devil's Brigade and the Sherman tanks as kind of a 1-2 punch of combined arms.
Yeah, and just to let you guys know, what was switched out from the first edition was Devil's Brigade were really nice and popular because in the first edition you could have pretty much spawned them on any empty building hex. So in here they took that out, but I'm guessing with the Major having his ability to get shooters next to them, that's kind of how it plays out then. So that's what they removed for the Sherman 76. Recon support. Recon support is from the base. If you're buying a 2-player core set, it's in there.
That's okay. Yeah, you can just get the card as I start. I'm just gonna turn on the fan quick here. All right, the recon support commander as we're getting to the last little stretch here. So the cool thing is I wanted to really focus on in the video game, there was this cool upgrade in Company of Heroes 2 that was the M1919 A6, basically an LMG that the U.S. riflemen could pick up. So now they kind of get that option. So whenever going forward, so basically at the end of round 1, it's 1 XP. You can go ahead, grab this for 1 XP, then spend your munitions on the AI upgrade, which is very similar to like the bar, so it's a little bit different. And now this gives you 1 range. So you just put this die down, you put the AI die upgrade down as well on the unit tray. And now again, if you have someone else spotting for these riflemen, they can help out and you can still get the XP upgrade for another AI. So these guys can be really strong anti-infantry support in particular. Yeah, you can still get the bazooka with the XP upgrade, so you can make it flexible if you want with 2 AI and 1 AP, or you can hyper focus with the AI. But this kind of just gives you that, again, matching the video game, a little bit more different role to what you can do here with this faction. And then recon sweep, you can use that to spot, right? So now you have the extra range on the rifleman. You can use that to spot for your LMGs now. And then also you can spot for the priest with that. So if you can plan ahead and see where the enemy is going to go, or if they look like they're immobile and basically fortified a spot, you can rely on the priest now to help bombard that spot. And then late game, yeah, you can actually use the recon sweep with the airdrop group, because you basically have vision of that area for the rest of the round to use the airdrop to drop them anywhere. So this commander is really kind of almost goes back to first edition in some ways and really offers you that kind of I can spawn this airdrop anywhere kind of play style, and then 1 drops for free. So just a very heavily focused on kind of that damage from afar support, like in team games, if you will. Just a lot of damage from a good distance.
Yep, and that's true there.
So the next one we have, there's the mobile support commander. Slava's not going to have this one. This is the one we actually unlocked with stretch goals. Essentially, it is going to be in the core box now, 2nd edition. It's going to be in the update kit, right? For those who basically are getting, returning backers in the update kit. So this mobile support company, this one we wanted to really focus on a different play style for each faction as you kind of get to see these, that the core faction commanders and even the expansion commanders like just weren't focused on for a particular faction. For US here, this is really just focusing on a different play style for the weapon teams. So the weapon teams with those other commanders, they're kind of a lot of paratroopers dropping in and key spots on the board to help support, but this one's really more of a push play style. So you can get basically you can pay 1 fuel from the get-go for manpower, so all infantry just cost 1 less manpower. So if you want to go less vehicles and a lot more weapon teams, this one's really focused on that, right? And then leading into combat group advance, this really is all of your infantry push forward for munitions. So you can again really push your weapon teams forward, and then you get the elite 57 AT gun crew, which really just gives them again that speed die, more mobility, stacked it with combat group advance, other weapon teams, extra durability with that AT gun as well, with 1 extra health that they normally don't get. And then if that's not enough of kind of that kind of weapon group support kind of role, then you get the priest. Yeah, you don't get 1 for free, but if you want to just add 1 in to kind of late game mobility to support a certain side of the map, I mean, that's what this commander really excels at.
Yeah, and remember, I love the anti-tank one, and making it have a speed die +1 health. I mean, giving that +1 health, that just makes it even stronger. Very great. This is so nice to see. Super nice. This is actually probably, if I had this one, I'd probably choose from the lock because I do like this and this mix here. Really good anti-tank, tier 2. And then you can tier 3 bring in some from the side. And it's super interesting. And this is also a new one that I don't have anything for.
Yep, Lost Brigades. Yep. So I think currently we have 2 of these 3 by default in the box. We're gonna have stretch goals to unlock these extra ones. So I'm not sure which one it is right now off the top of my head. Chris would probably better know this, but hopefully we get all 3. So what we're looking at with this commander is the kind of focuses again another option with that assault engineer rifleman, right? This is kind of a repeat. This one's a little bit different though. It looks like, I know there's a lot of text covering it right now, but this one actually is just the 1 XP. So this one you buy at the end of round 1, you don't get any for free. But then you can combine them with Jeeps, because later then with support Jeeps, Rudy didn't really take, this is the one that Rudy played the other day, but he didn't really focus on this, unfortunately. He did get the jeeps, but didn't get any assault engineers. So this commander's style really is to get by the assault engineers at the end of round 1. Instead, he went with the MG, right? So this one's really designed to buy the jeep, get the assault engineers in the jeep, transport them forward, and then once you get that as support jeep upgrade, you can get that free reinforce on that jeep to heal that rifleman. All right. And then you're kind of using that early and mid game to kind of basically buy you some time, get some good board positioning, and then you get the Jackson late game. But you can also buy a bulldozer as you unlock that in tier 3. So you can buy the dozer if you want to. Of course, you can go other options. You don't get one for free, but if you want to go this option, you get the dozer, and then you get that new Jackson. So again, you can kind of rely on your assault engineers for the AI damage, and then get that Jackson for free late game to help you with vehicles. Kind of like, not too much of a spoiler, but Rudy got late game very near the end to really focus on that. So
So that's all the commanders there, and a really breakdown. So I want to apologize about the kiddo when he wakes up. You know, I mean, you kind of have to go with the punches, and that's one thing me and Brian want to do. We want to spend time going through the commanders. We don't want, you know, I mean, rush it too much. But hopefully that gives you guys a good overview. And if you want to see this commander in play and just how the Americans play, watch the game that we commentated earlier on Thursday. Any comments, Brian? You
no,
might
that's
have?
pretty much it. Yeah, someone made the comment, the clown car from the video game. Yeah, that's kind of it. Yeah, as just a little note. Yeah, in the board game here, you can actually non-weapon teams. So riflemen in this example, the assault engineers can fire while in that jeep. So you can hop in that jeep, stay in the jeep. The jeep has the 1 AI, can get the 2 AI from the upgrade. The assault engineers can get AI upgrades. Just really a lot of fire from one vehicle. But again, if you lose the jeep with the infantry in it, you lose both. So it is a big gamble. So maybe, that helps support that clown car notion. But that's really it. Hopefully this covered all the commanders and the building board and the style. Again, just that firepower, mobility is really the focus of the US faction. A lot of fun. Don't really have a lot of units with the high health, but really make up for it in firepower and mobility. So hopefully that covers for everyone. Again, if you have any questions, comment on the video. Reach out to us on our Discord, comments on the Kickstarter, try to answer them.
But yeah, we do appreciate you guys watching. Thanks so much. Sorry about this little man. That's a problem. He's gonna eat everything. He's ready to play some Company Heroes. That's what he's complaining about. He wants to get in and play. But yeah, thanks guys. And we'll do another faction. We'll actually put even more time aside for the next faction. And if you guys do want to watch the Americans in action, we live commentated the game just on Thursday. Really a game where it was a developer versus Rudy, who's actually in chat right now. And Rudy, ask a question. If you've got a question, ask away. Just don't complain if the baby wants to talk.
All right, well, have a good one, everyone. That wraps it up. But yeah, hopefully you can see